Any cartoonist will tell you, cartoonists are a dime a dozen. If you don't have any cartoonist friends, then you don't know. And they all compete like Doonesbury. They all push like Bill Watterson. They all. I just ordered Berkeley Breeds Bloom County collection. They all push like this, and there's tens of thousands of them on the planet, and they all push like this, and they all try to take over the world. They try to take us. They try to take over our hearts with their memes, their living cartoon memes. But remember, it's a comic strip. It's not cancer meds. It's not. It's a movie. It's not. This is why I don't ask people for money on my stream beyond when I close out, and I do that for my family, right? Is because I feel that people kind of overvalued a lot of this. You got to remember, what are you adding to that? I don't think I add anything right now. I'll tell you right now, I don't ask for money because I feel that I don't add anything to people's lives other than just trying to entertain them. That's it. And so if they want to donate to me, they can. If they want to talk to me, they can. If I want to respond, I will. And you know, we have a great relationship, I think. And Disney needed your love because he somehow made like $5 billion or something off of cartoons. You got to remember, cartoons are for children. Now, there's millions and billions of children on the planet, and he should have made millions and billions of dollars. But his clout, where he gets to ask you for more money after he's mismanaged his business for 60 years, whether it's him or Eisner or Kathleen Kennedy or any of these other people. No, you mismanaged your fucking business and you are passing the cost of business onto the fucking consumer and price fixing shit that children need, like entertainment, healthcare, education, food, water, shelter. You're just up to your normal shitty price fixing as usual. And if you mismanage your business and cannot, efficiently create a product that doesn't cost $200 million and tanks in the box office like everything you've done with Marvel in the last 5 years, that is on you. And no, it is not the consumer's job to suffer price fixing on shit that their children pay for, that their children want. Right? It is not their it's not their job to price fix Disney. It's your fault that you didn't put situations in, or sorry, certain business plans in your execution. Yeah, I'm sorry if you went into the streaming empire and got your ass beat by Netflix and Prime or whatever. I'm sorry if you did that. But it is not your fucking constituency and the kids of the world that should have to pay for that mistake. You got too greedy. Your eyes got too big is the cliche that they say. Your eyes got too big for your head. And you bit off more than you could chew, and you thought you could build a media conglomerate and just take over the world. No, remember, you're a cartoonist. You're a media empire. You don't add anything to the world. You cost satellites, electricity, power. You add entertainment to the world, and that is of extremely high value. And I live in an entertainment world, and I'm snobby to attack you about this. I'm a hypocrite to attack you about this. But understand, you got this crazy idea in your head that you were this huge conglomerate. But no, Disney to us was always this single castle. Remember the Disney castle? Remember the Disney castle? It's this one solid image, It's this one solid castle that's kind of small. If it's the small park in the Disney theme park, you were kind of small. You had a small dream. You were cartoonists. We love you. I love Ralph Bakshi just as much as I love Walt Disney. I love Matt Groening. I know that Disney bought Matt Groening. I love Matt Groening as much as Disney loves Matt Groening. But understand, I know what you guys are worth. You're cartoonists. I'm worth less than you. I don't even make anything. You guys fill books with cool strips, and you fill movies that get put to cellulite, and you get broadcast to the entire world, and you are far. And I do that too. But the difference is, I don't make anything. I just criticize you. And here's me criticizing you. You've had your hand out for so long for so many bullshit IPs that I just don't value. You've let things go that you never would have let go before. You didn't unify, and you fought Nickelodeon, and you fought DreamWorks, and you fought all these other people, and now you're using the kids' interests and their IPs that they grew up with, like Star Wars, or I don't know, fucking Drake and Josh or something like that, right? You're using them to sell your empire. You gotta remember, we were all 7 once, and we needed this. We needed extraterrestrial. We needed Robin Hood. We needed, Puss in Boots. I know that Puss in Boots sucks, but we needed it. We needed it. We needed, Sword of the Stone, which to me was the Disney dream. You pull a sword out of a stone. You somehow make $1 billion out of a cartoonist salary. And trust me, we all live the make $1 out of 15 cents thing. But the difference is, when I make $1 out of 15 cents in the ghetto, selling drugs or working, fucking dead-end $10 an hour jobs or whatever, right? And I make $1 out of 15 cents by turning that into something, I don't go take that money and form a conglomerate and try to take over the world and a media empire and try to sway children or reduce the quality. I look at the quality of Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, and then I look at the quality of 4, 5, and 6, which is okay. I thought it was middling. By the time you guys got it, as 7, 8, and 9, you had driven the IP into the ground. Because I don't think you know what it's like to be consistent. I don't think you know what it's like for the children to need this. I think you do, but the problem is you have built something greater. You have gotten greedy, and you've built something greater than you can pay for. And you're going to pass the cost of business on to the children. And I will call you the child rapist that you are. You are out to farm children and their parents for money. What you built is no longer Snow White. It's, Soul. It's Marvel. It's Star Wars 9. So very, very tired.
The price hikes around the same time it reported financial results for the third quarter, with them revealing, one, Disney's overall streaming business has actually turned a profit for the first time.
Remember The Simpsons when they made fun of you back then? Remember? Rest home alone. So very, very tired. And they're making fun of you guys. You just keep on serializing your own dead corpse and selling it to children, and then you're raising the price? Your shit isn't worth the raising the price. Somebody should tell you. They're all in love with you. They won't tell you. They love you more than they love themselves. I will tell you. You raise the price on shit. You are raising the price on shit. I do not believe there is anything on Disney Plus that I would willingly watch right now beyond the cartoons that I've seen 50 times before. You got too big for your fucking britches, and your eyes got too big for your head, and you're in the worst situation that Walt could have ever imagined. You are burning the bridges that he built, so you can make more money to run this thing that you are not efficiently running into the ground. And you need to cut your fucking losses. Walt would tell you, you need to cut your fucking losses and just accept it. Maybe you can still make Frozens, but you'll never make Beauty and the Beast ever again. And I love Frozen more than Beauty and the Beast. And that's why I tell you these things, I like Frozen more than Beauty and the Beast. Which is why I tell you these things. I believe in you. I still believe in you somehow. I believe in, I believe in Mulan. I believe, I do.
With all that, too, Johnston saying, but we could make more money. Specifically saying, we do feel like we've earned that pricing in the marketplace, and we feel positive.
You didn't turn it. You've driven Marvel into the ground. You've driven Star Wars into the ground. You've pissed off the Republicans, which you know that's a nightmare. You're the target of everybody. They're trolling you and stealing animatronics from your fucking villages. And you have become the world's joke. You have become the world's joke. How long did you think that it was going to be a golden palace? What palace in history has not fallen? What palace in the history has standed thousands of years? The Parthenon? Maybe. Maybe you're a Parthenon. But no, the only way you're going to remain a Parthenon is if you continue to make Beauty and the Beast and, you know, The Little Mermaid and Bambi and Sword in the Stone and all the stuff that we grew up on. But no, you have this black cauldron in mind. You have this black cauldron in mind. You taught us better. You have a black cauldron in mind, and I know what happens. I know what happens.
Positively about that. And then, as far as the company's CEO, Bob...
Hopefully a happy ending when you turn around in time. You turn around and walk out of hell instead of into it.
Iger, he claimed they're not even worried about the customer pushback, saying every time we've taken a price increase, we've had only modest churn from that, nothing that we would consider significant, and also claiming that Disney hadn't seen any real amount of backlash to the announcement that they'd be getting tough on password sharing, and with that actually saying the real crackdown would begin in earnest in September. And everything that was just said, yeah, it makes sense. It's like what we talked about last time. It
Winter's
just becomes
coming.
a math problem.
They're about to be like, oh, well, we used a free or sharing concept with you for 10 years, and you used it for 10 years. Now we're changing that. You have to pay us, and it's extortion. It is. It's extortion. Now, you didn't have to give us free stuff, remember, and you think somewhere in your deluded piece of shit imperialist mind that because you gave us a bunch of free stuff and you sell us good streaming for $5, that you can just charge whatever you want for it. But no, and mark my words, I'm going to pull the camera real close, I'm going to look you in the eyes. You're raising the prices on children. You are raising the prices on children and parents. They aren't going to view it favorably. They have a job to get done, which is helping raise children. You aren't helping them with that. You're raising the price on that. You're stupid. You've let your lawyers grease you into a Unity style developer just seppuku is a nice word for it, I guess. You're like committing seppuku with your price fixing. Because you believe that we owe you something because you gave us something for free or for very cheap. No. We don't owe you anything. You're the one who needs us. Walt would tell you, which is why he always showed up on the fireside. It always shook everybody's hand and tried to show a face on the company. You guys descended into lawyers and trusts and litigation. And no, we don't trust you. No, we don't trust you to make a Frozen 2. You didn't.
Oversimplify it, but like if they're raising prices by 25%, like
you brought Aurora in to carry Frozen 2 through its marvelicity. And you marveled Frozen 2. You marveled Marvel. And we don't like you anymore. Are you getting it? Do you need somebody who just doesn't value you to give you their opinion? But I mean, that is the truth. We don't value you anymore. You have made kids movies terrible. And you're charging more money for Drek. You're a junk artist. I am not a Disney adult either. I'll put on a Ralph Bakshi before I'll put on Disney, motherfucker. I'll put on a Trailer Park Boys before I'll ever put on The Office. So understand, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you.
let's just say that's flat, as long as they don't lose.
But I'll tell you the truth, unlike everybody else, you had an IP that you weren't permitted to fuck up, you know? Same as George Lucas, same as Spielberg. You had IPs that you weren't permitted to fuck up because like South Park said, They are the manna from heaven for an entire generation. They weren't yours anymore. You know, Trey said it well when he was like, you know, you have essentially, I mean, I don't know, just go back and watch South Park. I don't need to repeat it.
20% of their
I don't need to put words in Trey's mouth.
Audience. It's a net positive for them. As we've seen with their past price increases, the amount of people that unsubscribed, so small compared to the amount of money they gained. With this ending up being one of those examples where the internet isn't reality. Like, how many times in the past have we covered a story where it was
internet is not reality. Like, for my favorite part of this is when you go looking up a Viking and they tell you that it looked like the Uganda Viking. Sure, Uganda Vikings were real. Yeah, absolutely. But do Vikings look like Uganda Vikings? No, and that's what the AI told you. But you assumed that it was correct because it's the AI. You didn't actually go and verify.
It's like, oh, Netflix.
You know, my stepfather believes in the phrase trust but verify. And I literally lectured him the first time I ever heard the phrase. And I think it's kind of funny. He stopped using the phrase. He stopped using it. And when he said to me the first time, I was like, trust but verify. And I was like, oh, no. Don't trust. Do verify. Don't trust. Do verify. And I remember this was a monumental thing for me. It was for him too, I think. No. There's no trust and verify. Trust but verify. There is only don't trust, do verify. Humans, if they think they can take advantage of you, they will. I'm certain of it as I am that I live and breathe. Don't trust, do verify.
Netflix is going to crack down on password sharing. Oh.
It's the progressive way of looking at things, right? I don't trust either of you. Show me proof and I'll believe you.
They're raising prices. And then social media would be ablaze for a week.
They're raising prices. Of course they are. They're price fixing us to death. Did you figure out what it was? It took me till this year till I knew what their ammunition was. They plan to use the gun of price fixing to spray us to death with their price fixing. That's what they plan to do.
Fuck Netflix or fuck whoever. And then in the next,
I'm gonna go play some like Fortnite now. Oh my god, I've been in this hole for a whole day. It's 11 p.m. on day 22, huh? Well, I farmed and I'm gonna stop. Exit. There we go. Quit. And I'm gonna change it to Fortnite ZB. Reload ZB. Fortnite. Reload ZB. Oh, sorry, Fortnite. Done. Now I change it. I go to Epic. I load it. We get out of EvE for tonight. I safely brought a healer here, which I'm crazy. And ooh, and I'll go play some Fortnite. Excuse me. I will continue to play video games, but I will use a DMCA free music stream here. I will do video unavailable. Crazy. Well, I can still do a search, so why were you that stupid? Why did you kill somebody's livelihood? I can still do a search and get exactly what I want. Why did you kill that video? Was there a point to killing the video? I got the information anyways. Well, while this takes 15 minutes on my F drive.
Quarterly report, they were like, turns out it was an amazing move on our part. Good job, us. So of course, there are likely policies and price increases where there is a ceiling, where a company can go too far and people go, fuck it, that was the final straw. But so far, we haven't seen that with Disney. But also, notably, while things seem to be going well for Disney, not everything. Because a third quarter statement also revealed that Disney's theme parks are struggling, with Johnson, the CFO, saying the higher income consumer is traveling internationally a bit more, and the lower income consumer is feeling a bit of stress. Which, yeah, probably for a number of reasons, including streamers just randomly raising their prices all the time. Also, I should say, like, when I say, oh, their parks aren't doing that well, they saw a 3% drop in their operating profit from last year, but we're still talking about an operating profit of $2.2 billion. So, you know, not that you were gonna, but don't go out there getting worried for Disney. But then, shifting gears, we're gonna talk about Vice President Harris experiencing her first major pro-Palestine protest since she launched her campaign. Right, because yesterday, Harris had two absolutely huge rallies in Wisconsin and Michigan. But the Michigan rally has since gotten more attention because there were protesters there interrupting her while she was trying to talk about Trump and Project 2025.
Thank you. Aside.
Right, and while some in the space have falsely showcased this as a singular moment, here's what happened. So you've got these protesters chanting while Harris is trying to do her speech. Harris keeps trying to talk over them until other members of the crowd then drown them out by loudly chanting her name. Something that he said became
camel toe.
Bigger issue when he realized that there was another
camel toe.
The writer that was making even less than Jake despite working the same job and being a parent. And so with it, Jake saying he thought that was wrong, he wanted that dealt with, but also noting that the other writer didn't want to rock the boat, saying that he liked his job.
But he said, hey, man,
you don't like your job. Your job is terrible. You're an attack artist. You don't like your job. Everything you do is a lie, including saying that you like your job. You don't. You should probably be playing, like, you know, Magic the Gathering, fly fishing, learning how to make wine, and going to a hipster douchebag chess club. You should not be talking about Mr. Beast, you fucking cocksucking piece of shit attack artist. I'll say it, because I don't care what you think. It's the truth, isn't it? You hear it when I say it, don't you? You hear the truth? You should probably go be a fly fisherman with a douchebag hipster chess club. You should make your own wine or something and figure out how to be an apiarist. You should not be a commentator on YouTube if you can't handle the fucking fire. If you can't handle the fucking heat, get your fucking ass out of the kitchen. Where's my Fortnite that I launched? Where's my Fortnite? You crashed or something dumb. Did you actually crash? No, you didn't. But you're in like full screen or something dumb. Are you in full screen right now? You suck. How am I gonna win when I'm super drunk if you can't even get a resolution right, you piece of shit developer? Come on, get the resolution right, you piece of shit. My native desktop resolution is 4K. Are you fucking serious? Why did that happen? Well, give me my desktop then, piece of shit, Windows. For fuck's sake. Stop stealing from me. Oh, no. Oh, no, look, I have the game open, so Windows might not be able to do anything. Oh, no, there we go, there we go. So, no, you're in 1920. Oh, no, well, yeah, you're in 1920 by 1080. Whatever you're on about, you fucking crazy piece of shit. Alt-right. Yeah. Nope. Yeah, do you understand that you're really dumb? Yeah, you're really dumb. You're actually really dumb. You have that resolution really far up your fucking ass, you piece of shit incompetent developer. You got that resolution pretty far up your fucking ass. You do. Look, I'm not kidding. Look, you have this resolution pretty far up your clueless fucking ass piece of shit developer. Just saying. It's true, isn't it? They do. There you go. Did you get a resolution? Hey, you did. Hey, after the 7th to 11th try, I finally got it. Hey. No, we want quality on our DLSS. There you go. And then off. I don't know. Sure. No. Epic. Apply. Post-processing's got to be epic. No hardware ray tracing. Shadows should be off entirely. And sure, take nanite. I'm actually okay with that. I actually am. There you go. There's the settings that I had when I logged out. You're a stupid piece of shit, cocksucking fucking developer, Epic. And these were the settings that I had when I logged out. Get a fucking clue. I don't understand how you still have a company. If you tried to be this incompetent in any other goddamn, sphere or, I don't know, industry, if you tried to be this incompetent in any other industry, you would be prosecuted by the government. You must get resolution right. You saw me fuck with it. You're fucking stupid, and you're a piece of shit, and you give me a free game, so I'm sorry I'm so, disloyal and disingenuous with you. But, no duo, Phil. We're taking squad. Yep. But I'm sorry, but you can obviously see that you have a resolution problem. I'm recording this. I'm going to publish it, and you're going to come back one day, and somebody's going to show you how much you suck dick. Right to your fucking face. And I hope my voice right now is playing when they do it. Because I'm not fucking around with you. Trying to change resolutions in Fortnite fucking sucks dick. I don't know how you manage to do it. Because you have the best clients in history. So, we pay you this much money, billions of dollars. You need to maybe look out for us instead of just going on your your golden parachute vacation. I said what I meant.
And that's how you feel, like if that's like.
So this is a different. No, this is Philip DeFranco, but is it all the same Philip DeFranco? No.
You see, stupid things.
No, it got worse. But I want music, but I don't know what I want. I think I'll take this. Oh, there we go. Oh, all the lawyers. Sorry. So I guess I'll just run something else then. Alright, fine. Just run Philip DeFranco then.
That right, you went to that meeting with me. And I said my piece, and he backed me up.
Why are you crying over Mr.
And it's
Beast?
a bet.
You really want his penis inside of you, don't you? You're not gonna get it.
Check the next deck.
You're not getting it. Not like this.
And they gave him a 7 to check the next deck. And if I knew
you were straight bitch made crying on fucking camera over some dude's fucking staff, what people he chooses to keep as staff, I wouldn't have ever listened to you. Straight bitch made, F it. And that guy's gotta be straight, right? Only a straight person would act that dumb. I don't know what's happening. I am standing on a team. They're going to shoot me now. Yep. Okay, that was fun. How I had 0 frames for as long as it took for me to be on the ground. Then it's solid 120. Pretty fun. Pretty fun. Yeah, pretty fun. Pretty fun how my frames were in the toilet for exactly as long as it took to get me on the ground. Do you think they did that on purpose? No. No. It's an accident. It's their terrible coding. Okay, so now I haven't had a frame rate loss in, what was this? Jesus Christ, I haven't had a frame rate loss in, you know, what, 95 seconds. But when I was being shot at, yeah, you better believe it. Frame rate loss up the fucking ass. Thanks, Epic. Worthless ass company. I'm kidding. I'm sorry, that was bitter and angry. But I mean, you just wasted 7 minutes of my life without my permission. It's not like I get to have a say in it or anything like that. You just stole my life for 7 minutes. I'm doing fine as I get in. When I reach the fucking engagement and I begin to shoot somebody, you drop my frames to 7 for exactly as long as the bullet that kills me, and then I hit the floor, sudden solid 120. Perfect. That's you. That's your design. That's you sucking dick and being bad at your job. It's why you, like all the other piece of shit AAA fucking triple anus cocksuckers, quadruple anus cocksuckers, are headed on that downward decline. Your stock, your choices, your money, everything you do. Because you just stand there and you do stuff like that. What just happened to me? You know? I'm not the only one. So let's see. Am I gonna... Nope. See, you tried to fuck me here with a backfill. No backfill. Bye. Try to fuck me with a backfill. You're looking like Blizzard. You're looking like Activision. Suck a dick, Epic. Do it again and I'm going off your game. And yes, I've spent quite a lot of money on Fortnite. Don't do this to me again. You think it's funny? I'm gonna make you painfully wait while your piece of shit client catches up with the rest of the world. I will make you painfully wait while you backfill me. I will make you painfully wait while I make a fucking actual point that's like could be proven in a court of law because it's happening. The evidence is right in front of you that you fuck us over all the time. You fuck us over all the time. You do. Watch how much time you're stealing from me right now. You say 40 seconds. No, you don't say anything at all. Never mind. We're just gonna go back to this.
He's gonna lose his job.
To this straight bitch made.
Too, I wouldn't have done it.
See now, the difference between me crying is I'm crying over somebody who's dead, or a dream that is dead, or someone's dream that I loved is dead, or, you know, some musician that I liked is dead or something like that. When you cry, it's because you don't have Mr. Beast's dick in your mouth.
Also, as far as Jimmy himself, Jake says his goal isn't actually helping people, it's being the best YouTuber.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
With Jake echoing a criticism that we've heard about Mr.
Oh man, you kind of even look like him. Look, you kind of look like him. Do you guys see how you guys kind of look like each other, or is it the same dude? Is it the same dude? I can't tell. Is it the same dude? No. That's this dude. That's this dude. Oh, you guys are perfect for each other. You had a lover spat. You had a fallout, huh? I'm sorry. Look, you're perfect for each other. You have the same perfect porcelain veneer teeth. You have the same piece of shit on your face. That piece of shit on your face has some shit on its face. You have the same idiot haircut. And you have the same loser Gap clothes. You're perfect for each other. We've had this conversation lately on my stream a lot. You guys are having your big fallout in public. But I mean, you're perfect for each other though. You are perfect for each other though. Oh good, you didn't backfill me or fuck me. I was going to leave your game. I actually was kind of looking forward to it. I was going to watch Mr. Beast have a fight with his boyfriend. You guys are perfect for each other. Look at your porcelain veneers. You're perfect for each other. Why is my sound dropping off over and over and over again, Epic? Do you have some kind of sound driver problem or what? Why is my sound cutting out over and over again, Epic? Alright, Devstar, too cool for you. I'm with you, and I don't have a weapon. And I don't want to steal yours, but I'm going to steal this one. Because there's someone coming. Yeah. Fuck this guy. Nope. Fuck this guy. What was that? What was that? So there's a dude right here. Oh, what was that? Where did the damage come from? What are you talking about? I was fighting that dude, 100 down. Oh, come on. That's what happened? Come on. The guy from the... Oh, my God. Okay.
Says his goal isn't actually
Where
helping.
did the damage come from? I was in a 1v1. Where did that damage come from? I wouldn't have even known what the source was. You're stupid. Cut the damage, you idiots. Cut the damage on shit that I don't even know where it's coming from. Be a good developer. Oh no, I'm not doing this. No. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. Oh god, is he coming here? He is coming here. Son of a bitch. Where is he? Fuck this, I'll get more heals and I'm fine. I don't want to trust these people anymore. I'm just gonna kill this guy myself. Fuck this guy. This guy. Ooh, good. You suck. Where's my team? God damn it, man. What are you doing? You've been looting for 5 minutes, you suck dick. You finally started fighting. I've died twice. What are you doing? Oh, I'm in build. This is worthless. No wonder it's garbage gameplay. No wonder you put me in fucking build. Let those cocksuckers suck each other's dick for the rest of eternity. They can sit in that toilet while it boils up into their lungs. That's fine by me, but no, 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 no. No, no, build. No, build. No, build. No, 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 no. Nope, nope. I want reload, 0 build. Nope, nope. Look at how you keep changing all of my settings. You changed all of my video settings from last night. Remember, I got 4 wins. You changed all of my video settings. You changed all of my join settings, and you fucked me. Why? Why? Literally, is it your software sucking dick, or is it you? I mean, seriously. Like, come on, man. Like, all these settings were perfect last night. I come in, you changed all of my video settings, all of my goddamn fucking join settings, all of my matchmaking settings. What's the goddamn point of even leaving the game? Shouldn't I, at that point, at that point, might I as well reinstall the game every single time I play it? For real, dude. Your fucking piece of shit live service clients suck dick at conserving settings. Then I know that I logged perfectly. I didn't have a disconnect or anything like that at all. Your fucking client sucks dick at preserving settings. It's actually really bad. You can see it happening live in a real time. It's disgusting. And that was terrible what you just did to me. You put me in build. Motherfucker, I've not been in build in 24 months or something like that. Don't you ever put me in build again. You know I did not join build. You know I did not. You try to force me in there with your buggy ass code. I know you did. I know you did. Now look how perfect this frame rate is. It's like 120 solid. But not when I'm being shot. Not when I'm being shot, no. Then it drops for the 5 and I embarrass my team and I don't know, I'm sorry, but yeah, we get the perfect 120 in a scene with 100 people, but when it gets down to a 4v4, my frames are in the goddamn toilet as usual, like your fucking future, piece of shit developer.
People, it's being the best YouTuber. With Jake echoing a criticism that we've heard about Mr. Beast for years, right? Filming yourself doing nice things isn't actually doing nice things.
I think when he's generous on camera, it's the least authentic thing in the world. There's an element of, you know,
where are we going?
Hey, you're crying. That's
Call
so
a target.
Good for camera.
Go somewhere.
I'm so glad he's.
Oh no.
If you're crying because you're so thankful that you got XYZ, And then you go, I'm so glad you needed it that bad so I could come in and can you cry?
They don't care. They don't care
I'm
about
so
the
good for
team. They don't care
camera,
what
and you
happens.
can-
They're not going to get any
It made me
kills.
uncomfortable when I was working there, and I didn't like it, and I vocalized it sometimes, and I think that's why I wasn't on camera as much. Everybody loves Jimmy, and behind closed doors, he is massively great, and that image is cultivated purposefully and intentionally, and it's branding, it's marketing, it's YouTube.
But with all of that said, it brings us to what's really gotten the most attention here. Because in 2021, Jimmy's team, they called Jake back for a video. And the idea there was 100 days in solitary confinement. A video that may sound familiar to you, because Mr. Beast's team actually did end up putting a video together, but it was with someone else. Because according to Jake, the first time they filmed it, it went very, very wrong. Starting off, you had Jake saying that all the stuff that they gave him to try and make the confinement bearable actually had the opposite effect, saying that the hot tub wasn't actually connected to a filtration system, so it got very smelly, the shower was always cold, the ice cream machine was either too loud, or if he turned it off, it started to smell like mildew and rotten milk. Also, notably, he said the lights never shut off despite him making requests, as well as complaints that he couldn't sleep.
I had good people looking out for me. I had a lot of good people looking out for me saying, this, we gotta stop. So I just wanted to turn the lights off. And I'm vocalizing to people, I wish the lights would turn off. And I go up to my friend, my good friend. And I go, they're not turning the lights off. He goes, what? That's a war crime. We're not allowed to do that to terrorists. Oh, good. 24 hours breaking the Geneva Convention, I guess, is what we're doing.
With him also going on to say that he'd get lines to say to the cameras from Jimmy or the director.
This is the note I got from the director, from Jimmy, when I'm receiving some cash. He said, Jimmy said, can you say to the camera how thankful you are that now you can pay back your student loans?
You're a weird, demented dude. You're weird. You're fucking
You know
weird.
how hard it was to do a take
You're
of
a
that?
fucking unhinged cartoon character.
They
I don't want to
pretend
listen
make
to
it
you.
genuine.
You don't deserve this.
I don't want to have student loans. I don't want to be a cage.
Shut the fuck up, dude. You're
But
sinking.
Jimmy's a guy
You
with the
don't
money.
know
If
it.
you do what he says, he'll do what you want. You'll
These people are so goddamn dumb. They thought
So the whole
everybody
experience,
else was
Jake
gonna
says
do
that he
the
was
work for
suffering, but
them.
he was always trying to perform, right, to stay on for the cameras.
I'm talking to the camera! And I'm being, hey, it's been a couple days, I'm not doing so hot, which if
You're
I was
not.
filming a video, that's what I should be doing for the camera, but it was too real. If they're faking videos, why couldn't we fake this one? If we're allowed to let these cast members have some time off
What happened there?
Of this difficult
Come
challenge,
on,
how
you
can
threw
we
the
fake
gun
turn
on the
lights
ground.
off?
But I'm also
Piece
saying,
of
even with
shit,
everything
you
that was
knew I
going
had
on,
that
Jimmy
gun
had
in my
challenges for Jake to do,
fucking
like solving
inventory.
Rubik's Cube.
What
He says he
happened to
tried
you?
to refuse, but was told to just do the thing. And then saying there was another challenge to run a marathon on a treadmill, with Jake saying that he felt like he couldn't say no.
There was so much pressure to just do it, just do the thing, And if I refuse, it's just, that's the whole video. I get the budget, so much money up in flames, because Jake said he wouldn't want to do the thing. And so I wanted to be a good sport, and I wanted to get the boost, and I wanted the cash, and so I started running at 12. I was able to take some breaks, and I asked him, how long do I have? He goes, until I get back. And I'm running until 3 a.m. I got up for
Oh,
like
3 a.m. Oh, 3 a.m.
Oh,
Oh.
the blisters I had.
Oh,
You wouldn't
blisters.
believe. Just all over, just these big red. I couldn't walk. My muscles were like just the lactic acid.
Right after that, Jake says that he called it off, saying he couldn't do it anymore.
And then he let me leave right away. They wanted to make sure, everything was fine. So I, slept for a while. They turned the lights off. And they brought, it's like they brought in all my friends, to make it. They brought it all to my life. And just.
With Jake then going on to claim that the first
You
thing
guys
Jimmy
suck,
said to
dude.
him was,
You're
Yeah,
up
just
jacking
ruffles.
off by yourselves. What are you
Fighting
doing?
words. Yeah, the mental health is the most important thing. I just want to make sure you're okay. And the last thing we want you to do is, I can almost hear the words to come out of his mouth. The S, he just stopped right before it got out.
See, Jake saying he ended up getting $100,000 and some change for the whole experience. So of course with that he ended up having to pay over $40,000 in taxes that year. You also had Jake saying that he shared some text messages that he got right after they cut filming, or where it looks like he said that he wasn't in a good place mentally, that the blisters on his feet still hurt to walk on, that his therapist was concerned about him. And all this is something that was supposed to be a fun Mr. Beast video, not obviously a traumatic experience. But Jake also saying he's never been invited back to the channel since then. But then also after sharing that story, Dawson shifted directions and asked Jake about the Ava Chris Tyson situation and whether he witnessed any sexual misconduct at the company. Which we saw Jake reply that he spent a considerable amount of time with Ava, and while she definitely made offhand and gross jokes, they didn't raise any concern in Jake because he's a comedian. But Jake also went on to say that it was more than just Ava.
I heard, people have been let go for sexually assaulting some very young people. Well, there was a known sex offender, registered sex offender, convicted sex offender, on the registry and everything, who worked there. But that guy, from what I hear, I can't confirm or deny, from what I hear, he's on the registry for doing some not great stuff to some underage people. And they knew that. He's working at a channel that has underage people on and around and was targeted to underage people. And they covered up the fact that not only did he work there, but he was like the manager when it all started.
With Dawson then going on to say that another former Mr. Beast employee said that the company was working to expunge the record of this employee from the sex offender registry. With that person being identified as Delaware, and people quickly making connections saying, hey, isn't that Jake the Viking's brother-in-law? Right, one, Jake the Viking also being a former Beast employee, and two, that's something that he confirmed today, explaining on X, yes, Delaware is my brother-in-law. Yes, he is a RSO. And saying when he was 21, a 16-year-old girl accused him and others of SA when she was 11. Delaware took a plea deal. That's why there was no jail time, but he still had to register. And with that saying he was hired before I was, and was actually the reason I got hired at Mr. Beast. Before being hired, Delaware sat down with Jimmy and Sue, Jimmy's mom, and explained to them everything. So yes, Jimmy knew, but again, this incident happened in 2010. Delaware was hired in 2017, 2018. And going on to claim Delaware's charges are set to be dropped this fall. I understand why anyone would be upset and frustrated over these allegations, and I do not blame them. Hurting kids in any way is completely unacceptable, but in the case of Delaware, I firmly believe he did nothing wrong and look forward to the day these charges are dropped. But with all that said, as far as if there's more to the story regarding allegations, at the very least, I'll say Dawson has promised a part 3.
So I will just tell you, James, it will be in part 3, so you don't have to harass my people. It will be about serious allegations of sexual misconduct in the company and your direct involvement in covering up those crimes. And I'll make sure to give you full credit and plaster your face all over the screen when we talk about that.
And then it also doesn't end there. I mean, Rolling Stone, for example, just published an article last night where they spoke to a woman who was reportedly Ava's executive assistant from 2023 to 2024, with her claiming the two formed a sexual relationship before she got the job, but also noting that she always felt like she had to say yes to anything to get the job, claiming that it got to the point where Ava would just start dropping her pants randomly and ask for oral sex. And that former assistant saying everything became very one-sided and she now views this as sexual assault. Also, in terms of a response, we haven't seen anything public yet from Jimmy or his team, but there is an email that appears to be an internal communication from Jimmy to those within the company that's been making the rounds online. Right, and that's saying the third-party investigation that Jimmy promised following the Ava Chris Tyson allegations that will be expanded to include, quote, a full assessment of our internal culture and to investigate allegations of inappropriate behavior by people in the company. The email also going on to say that the company is implementing several changes in light of the preliminary findings of that investigation, with that including hiring a new chief human resources officer and implementing mandatory training on safety, sexual harassment, diversity, sensitivity, and workplace conduct. Also saying they'll be implementing anonymous reporting and listening sessions with the new president and COO of the company, saying they've also asked an external company to come in and review their policies and practices. With Jimmy saying, as your leader, I take full responsibility and I am committed to continue to improve and evolve my leadership style. I recognize that I also need to create a culture that makes all our employees feel safe and allows them to do their best work. But for now, that is where we are. And of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on this whole situation in those comments down below. But then, I gotta say, it's been fun for me to learn how you guys are using your SeatGeek winnings. From comedy shows to festivals, our weekly SeatGeek $500 giveaway lives on, and you beautiful bastards are crushing it. Also, for the uninitiated, SeatGeek is the #1 rated live event ticketing app with over 28 million downloads and access to a wide array of entertainment to get you and a loved one out of the house. And my team work with SeatGeek to extend the $500 weekly giveaway, and if you haven't entered yet, just do it. Next week's winner could be you. You just add code PDS to your SeatGeek account, you get $10 off, and you could be one of our lucky weekly winners. That's $500 in credit towards any of SeatGeek's 70,000 events. And also, if you're new to SeatGeek, you can add code PHIL for $20 off your first purchase. But again, SeatGeek vets can add code PDS, which gets you $10 off any purchase. And again, you'll be entered for your chance at a $500 SeatGeek credit,
What?
no purchase
I couldn't
necessary.
even do
And
anything!
extra awesome. If you're
Come
interested in
on,
the
man! I couldn't even shoot the
$1,000
plunger
CP credit,
before I was
candidate
dead.
user
What's with the
credit,
one-shot
double entry
bullshit?
and double win.
When I shoot people, it
If you
takes
guessed in your
35,
inbox as well
40
with the daily
rounds.
dip,
When
and
they shoot
subscribe
me,
right
it's like
now.
3.
Good,
It's so
but
stupid.
frightening news. We need to talk about how a possible terrorist attack at a Taylor Swift concert was foiled in
damn it.
Vienna. Because the details that Austrian officials have given, they are serious and scary. Because Taylor was scheduled to perform 3 shows this weekend, but after 2 suspects were arrested over this plot, event organizers and Taylor's team announced that they had no choice but to cancel for everyone's safety. As far as the 2 suspects who have been arrested, they're 19 and 17-year-old Austrians, with reports saying that they were inspired by the Islamic State. With that, you have reports referring to the 19-year-old as the main suspect, and officials claim that he began working on this plan back in July, and he actually previously uploaded a note of allegiance to the Islamic State online. Authorities also say that he confessed to plans to kill as many people as possible outside the concert venue. Also, that he quit his job last month and stated that he still had big plans. You also have Austria's intelligence chief saying chemical substances were found out.
Come on, man! I didn't even get to land! Fix your fucking game!
Officials also saying he had downloaded manuals for bomb building and that they found hydrogen peroxide, homemade explosives, and detonators at his home. And so with all this, you had the Interior Minister speaking at a press conference saying the situation was serious, but a tragedy was prevented. For the 17-year-old suspect, authorities say that he had recently been employed by a company that would have provided services at the concert venue. There's also a 15-year-old that's being questioned, but right now investigators are saying they're not seeking anyone else in connection to the plot. But also with this, you have people now wondering if the status of any other future shows are going to change. Right, our next and final stop on the European leg of our tour.
Make them invulnerable till they land. That's bullshit. Make us invulnerable till they land.
Stadium shows. But also with that, police will be working with security teams to make sure appropriate actions are taken. And this, you with outlets like Reuters, noting the UK is already on high alert after racist riots have been breaking out in the country. Many of those, of course, tracing back to a stabbing at Taylor Swift dance class. And so for now, we'll have to wait to see if there are any updates that come from that. Now that said, as far as Taylor, she hasn't addressed any of this directly herself, and her team hasn't put out any statements aside from the one announcing that the Vienna shows were canceled and that ticket holders will get refunds shortly. So with that, you have some fans upset by this, thinking Taylor needs to say something, or there needs to be an announcement to reschedule the shows. But it's also worth noting that this whole situation is likely one that Taylor is not taking lightly herself. I mean, she's even previously called an event like this her biggest fear, saying that after the bombing at an Ariana Grande concert and the shooting in Vegas, she was terrified to go on tour because she didn't know how to keep her fans safe. And also saying this fear of violence, it extends to her personal life. She even carries quick plot army-grade bandage dressing around with her. So while she's not one to usually cancel shows, it makes sense that organizers still made this call given how extreme the situation was. Well, obviously you had fans shaken, very disappointed, some traveling from all over the globe to go. Some have found unity still. People sharing photos of Swifties congregating in Vienna, singing and trading friendship bracelets still. But really, what matters most is that everyone is safe. A tragedy has been avoided. And I'm happy today that the story ends with disappointment and not a number of dead. But then in quick business and entertainment news that may affect your wallet, Disney is going to be raising its prices again. With them specifically on October 17th, raising the price of both ad and ad-free subscriptions to Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus by as much as 25%. And you know what? They have earned it. Or at least, that is what their CFO, Hugh Johnston, is saying. Because this week, Disney announced the price hikes around the same time it reported financial results for the third quarter, with them revealing, one, Disney's overall streaming business has actually turned a profit for the first time. So with all that, Hugh Johnston saying, but we could make more money. Specifically saying, we do feel like we've earned that pricing in the marketplace, and we feel positively about that. And then, as far as the company's CEO, Bob Iger, he claimed they're not even worried about the customer pushback, saying every time we've taken a price increase, we've had only modest churn from that, nothing that we would consider significant. And also claiming that Disney hadn't seen any real amount of backlash to the announcement that they'd be getting tough on password sharing. And with that, actually saying the real crackdown would begin in earnest in September. And everything that was just said, yeah, it makes sense. It's like what we talked about last time. It just becomes a math problem. And I'll oversimplify it, but if they're raising prices by 25%, let's just say that's flat, as long as they don't lose 20% of their audience, it's a net positive for them. As we've seen with the past price increases, the amount of people that unsubscribe is so small compared to the amount of money they gain. With this ending up being one of those examples where the internet isn't reality. Like how many times in the past have we covered a story where it was like, oh, Netflix is going to crack down on password sharing. Oh, they're raising prices. And then social media would be ablaze for a week of fuck Netflix or fuck whoever. And then in the next quarterly report, they were like, turns out it was an amazing move on our part. Good job, us. So of course, there are likely policies and price increases where there is a ceiling, where a company can go too far and people go, fuck it, that was the final straw. But So far, we haven't seen that with Disney. But also, notably, while things seem to be going well for Disney, not everything. Because their third quarter statement also revealed that Disney's theme parks are struggling. With Johnson, the CFO, saying the higher income consumer is traveling internationally a bit more, and the lower income consumer is feeling a bit of stress. Which, yeah, probably for a number of reasons, including streamers just randomly raising their prices all the time. Also, I should say, like, when I say, oh, their parks aren't doing that well, they saw a 3% drop in their operating profit from last year, but we're still talking about an operating profit of $2.2 billion. So, you know, not that you were gonna, but don't go out there getting worried for Disney. But then, shifting gears, we're gonna talk about Vice President Harris experiencing her first major pro-Palestine protest since she launched her campaign. Right, because yesterday, Harris had two absolutely huge rallies in Wisconsin and Michigan. But the Michigan rally has since gotten more attention because there were protesters there interrupting her while she was trying to talk about Trump's project.
Yeah, bitch! Woo!
Right, and while some in the space have falsely showcased this as a singular moment, here's what happened. So you've got these protesters chanting while Harris is trying to do her speech. Harris keeps trying to talk over them until other members of the crowd then drown them out by loudly chanting her name. So that's one of the first key moments, but then once those Kamala chants die down, the pro-Palestine demonstrators still continue as Harris went on trying to give her speech.
Oh my God, Kamala. Kamala.
Speech. With that, then prompting the crowd to once again overwhelm them with chants of Kamala, with Harris then chiming in herself.
All good. I'm here because we believe in democracy. Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now.
I am speaking
But then
now.
after those two instances, the protests still continued on as Harris tried to bring the conversation back to Trump.
I am speaking now.
If he is elected,
I am speaking now. I'm sorry.
Donald Trump intends to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations.
Intends to? What do you mean intends to? We're dealing with the fallout right now today. So a child dies today because of something that he did in the last 4 years. What are you talking about? Intends to?
He intends to cut Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah, I mean, he did that. He did that.
He intends to surrender our fight against the climate crisis, and he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
Otherwise, I'm speaking.
Right, so this was a super notable moment for a number of reasons. Starting with, because one, well, Biden has faced a lot of criticism from progressives and pro-Palestine activists for his unwavering support of Israel until now.
I mean, that was the mandate of the constituency, though. The constituency told them to support Israel. We told them to do that. I don't know if... I can't help you if you're low IQ and you don't understand it. But I mean, you know, you told us to do that. I told them to do that. I told them. Support Israel, support Palestine.
This has largely been protected from all that. So two...
I told them to do that. Good people support both. We can be a friend in a time of need. You guys ever thought about how you constantly think that it's all just some war game where they're going to rob us? No, sometimes it's just friendship.
There were a lot of eyes on how she was going to respond to this issue, especially as right now she hasn't outlined a full platform that's substantially different from Biden's here. Though 3, in general, she has been more outspoken about the Palestinian suffering and Israeli accountability, with us seeing her forcefully calling for a ceasefire, taking aim at Israel for blocking aid to Gaza, and speaking repeatedly about the dire conditions in Palestine, among other things. And notably here, it wasn't just those 3 moments. We later learned that she actually at least tried to hear from pro-Palestine groups there. In fact, just before yesterday's rally, Harris met with leaders of the Uncommitted National Movement, which is the group that mobilized over 100,000 people to withhold their votes from Biden in protest during Michigan's primary. With her campaign telling reporters that during the brief engagement, Harris reaffirmed that her campaign will continue to engage with those communities. Then with the events from yesterday, it shows that at least part of those groups, they want her to do more. And then as far as the reaction to what we saw yesterday, depending on where you went, it was mixed. Right? I mean, you had no shortage of people applauding her reaction, calling the protesters hecklers, and saying she came off very strong, saying what she said is not a diss, it is just a fact. But then others going further than what Kamala Harris was saying, doing that Trump's plan or desire if he becomes president is to kick pro-Palestinian protesters out of the country, that he would crush their protests. And that's of course in addition to what he would do in the Middle East. But this also, as you had a number of people condemning her response, accusing her of silencing the protesters and coming off as dismissive and condescending. With some saying she should have at least acknowledged the demonstrators and made them feel heard. Though there you had others pushing back saying they didn't want to be heard, they wanted to cause a nuisance. But then also some connected to this, but also a number separate saying, she just needs to have better go-to responses for protesters. So again, this is a good number of people. We're happy with her response. But for now, 1, we'll have to wait to see if there's any sort of impact. 2, I'd love to know your thoughts in general regarding this. And 3, just a friendly reminder, there are 89 days left till the election. You can go to vote.org to register to vote, check your registration if you think you're registered to vote, and also just come up with a voting plan. Because more than ever, there's a lot at stake nationally, statewide, and very local. What's the point of a beautiful bastard being informed if you don't follow it up with action? Polls can look however they're going to look. Doesn't matter if you don't vote. And then, if you ever find yourself struggling to turn your brain off once your head hits the pillow, toss and turn and waking up multiple times throughout the night? Because I've been there. But I'm going to say, you need to listen up because the fantastic partner and sponsor of the PDS, Beam Dream, it's made with the highest quality sleep promoting ingredients to help you and me unwind from busy days and get the deep sleep that we need and deserve. And when I say need, I mean it, need. I've been using Dream for years now and I'm sleeping better. And an important note, it doesn't make me feel groggy in the morning. I wake up actually feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Plus, there's no added sugar and 15 calories with a lot of delicious flavors to choose from, like peanut butter, their original flavor, cinnamon cocoa, which we still love, and white chocolate peppermint. Y'all, just 1 scoop of Beam Dream is clinically shown to help you fall asleep faster, sleep through the night, and wake up refreshed. Also, I'll say, it is summer, it is hot here. I find myself drinking my Dream over ice. I love that, but also they have Beam's Dream capsules, which are also great when you're traveling. So find out the easiest way to get to sleep and stay asleep when you go to shopbeam.com/DeFranco, use code DeFranco, or scan the QR code to get up to 35% off with my exclusive discount. That's shopbeam.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco. And then let's talk about JD Vance accusing Tim Walz of stolen valor. It's one of the growing side stories in the current news cycle. Vance claiming that Walz retired early from the National Guard to avoid deployment. Though notably, there's no evidence right now that Walz retired to avoid deployment. Walz retired after serving 24 years in the Army National Guard. 2 months later, his unit had been given notice that they would be deployed. But also, on the subject, I'm some normie that's outside of the military. So whenever I try to bring in people that are actually connected to the space. So to try to get a better understanding of all this, you still press these two. In addition to being a
you blocked me!
He studied international
fucking
relations
idiot,
and
you
terrorism
blocked
at
me,
West
you
Point.
fucking
He
idiot.
served in Iraq.
Why did you block me?
Afghanistan,
Get out of the
content on
door.
Military, national security, and foreign affairs. So with this situation where you have Walz filing to run for Congress
Get out of
months
the
before
door,
he
you
retired from the
fucking
service,
idiot.
we started by asking Preston if Walz would have known that he was being deployed when he filed for Congress or when he filed his retirement.
So this is why I say it's a little bit complicated. There's so many other factors at play here. For one, most people don't make it to 20 years. Most people leave at the 3, 6, 7 year mark. When I was
You're on the
active
ground.
duty,
Get
we were
out of the
deploying
door, idiot.
About every 12 months or every 18 months. So it's just constant. I understand he was on National Guard, so it's a little bit different there. But anybody who retired or left the service between roughly 03 and 2011 would have done so with a deployment, knowing that a deployment is coming at some point in the future. A deployment coming down the pipeline is a decision point. And I had countless soldiers decide that that deployment coming meant that it was time for them to move on and try something else in life, or for any number of reasons. Maybe it wasn't good for them to go down range. Maybe they had a new kid on the way, a sick family member, a spouse took a new job. Who knows what it might be? So anytime a deployment notice comes down, there's a lot of people, and it always has been the case, to
that do a spiritual movement pretty much.
This day, that kind of serves as a decision point.
Yeah, but that's a decision point. It is. It's like a spiritual movement almost. Why am I in a lobby with this dude? No. that's a friend. Nice, yeah.
For someone's career. And in my reading, that's kind of what this looks like here.
Also with the situation, Vance has come out at Walls for what he sees as lying about seeing combat to advocate for gun control.
And he was making a point about gun control. He said we shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets. Well, I wonder, Tim Waltz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went?
You guys commit career suicide trying to don the mantle. It's just disgusting. I wouldn't be able to do it either. They'd be like, you were a meth addict and a thief, and you ran with strippers and prostitutes and drug dealers, and you were a kingpin, and you were nasty. You lived on the streets. You lived on the government's fucking dole for 20 years. Yeah, I lived off of $3 grand a year or whatever for a long time. Yes, I did. You guys fucked the world. Every time I had a job, I had to pay $2 grand rent. You guys fucked the world. Okay.
Into Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone. What bothers me about Tim Waltz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not.
And with this, Walls has been very open about never having seen combat, and Vance has also been very open about not seeing combat either. Where Vance was a journalist for the air base that he was at in Iraq, whereas Walls provided security on bases in Europe during Operation Enduring Freedom. So from an outside point of view, as a non-veteran, Vance attacking Walls for not seeing combat is kind of like the pot calling the kettle black. And as a whole, it seems like this is a kind of very petty argument, so I asked Preston if that's truly the case here.
Yeah, I think we've done a bad job in the veteran community, the military community, of kind of creating, tiers here that don't exist. So in the last 20 years or so, there's been a lot of opportunities for people to deploy to a combat zone. That wasn't the case.
What?
Prior to 2011, it is not the case right now. There's countless leaders, great leaders, across the military that have never been in a combat zone. It's not their fault. They didn't choose to not go to a combat zone. We just aren't actively fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan like we were for much of the global war on terror. So when I say unfortunately we've created this hierarchy, it's unnecessary because somebody today is just as much a soldier, sailor, marine, or airman as somebody who served in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Where did you get all of that loot? I landed on the same loot you did. You had a full stack. I had a shotgun.
Another veteran creator tweeted that you only respect the service of the people you like and agree with, and you don't actually respect service at all. Also, you had Dr. Waitman Bjorn writing JD Vance was a fucking reporter for a fixed-wing aviation unit for 6 months. He's not Audie Murphy. And on the other side, you have people like Representative Waltz saying in a video categorizing Walz's retirement as the quarterback of a big team walking away from their team right before they go to the Super Bowl. And then also kind of a call out about trying to keep the peace. You had fighter jet astronaut Senator Mark Kelly writing, "Hey JD Vance, did you forget what the USMC taught you about respect? Tim Walz spent decades in uniform. You both deserve to be thanked for your service. Don't become Donald Trump. He calls veterans suckers and losers, and that is beneath those of us who have actually served." So with all this, obviously I want to know everyone's thoughts here, but especially if you're active duty or you're a veteran, I'd love to know what you're thinking here and why. And then the starvation of millions in Gaza might be justified and moral, according to a guy by the name of Bezalel Smotrich.
Brother, this guy stinks!
Also, to be clear, this is not just some random crazy guy on the internet. One, he's also a guy who was once questioned in connection to a plot to use 700 liters of gasoline to blow up vehicles on a major highway. And two, he is Israel's Minister of Finance. And along with Itamar Ben-Gvir, a guy who's been arrested in the past for inciting racism and supporting a terrorist organization, and is now the Minister of National Security, Smotrich has been dubbed one of the far-right kingmakers of Netanyahu's government. Because in 2020, Netanyahu formed an alliance with them and their parties to get back in power. And so with that, these terrifying comments are just the latest thing that have people worried about how much influence far-right extremists have in that government. And to give you the full context here, Smotrich said all this in a speech just this week, and his specific words were, quote, "It's not possible in today's global reality to manage a war. No one will allow us to starve 2 million people, even though that might be just and moral until they return the hostages." With him also saying that Israel was, quote, "bringing in humanitarian aid because we have no choice," and adding, "We are in a situation that requires international legitimacy to conduct this war." And finally, claiming you cannot fight Hamas with one hand and give them aid with the other. But to be clear here, right, the aid is meant for the victims of this war, and Israel has control over aid that enters Gaza, and then aid groups are in charge of distributing it. For sure, there have been some reports of Hamas trying to steal aid, but it's not clear right now that it is a widespread issue. Right? I mean, for example, you have an American official revealing that in the past, his Israeli counterpart was unable to give him or the Biden administration any specific evidence that Hamas was stealing aid shipments. However, aid groups and international organizations have presented evidence that Israel is restricting food aid into Gaza. Actually, with that, UN experts claimed last month that famine has spread across the entire country, accusing Israel of conducting an intentional and targeted starvation campaign that they described as a form of genocidal violence. And to that point, you have an ICC prosecutor actually seeking arrest warrants for Netanyahu on charges including the use of starvation as a weapon of war. But notably, Netanyahu has denied those allegations, making that same claim that if Palestinians in Gaza aren't getting enough food, it's because Hamas is stealing it. Now, with all that said, going back, we now have Western allies condemning Smotrich's comments. Right? The EU, for example, came out with a statement noting again that deliberate starvation of civilians is a war crime, and adding that these comments, they demonstrate his contempt for international law and for basic principles of humanity. With him finally there saying they expect the Israeli government to unequivocally distance itself from the words of Minister Smotrich. Then, as far as the U.S. State Department, you had a spokesperson say, "We are appalled by these comments and reiterate that this rhetoric is harmful and disturbing," adding there that Joe Biden and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken have repeatedly stressed the need to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, remove any obstacles to the flow of aid, and restore basic services for those in need. But then also with that, some other big news is that the State Department is also now calling on Israel to investigate allegations of sexual abuse in the country's detention facilities. Because if you didn't see, this week, Israeli media obtained leaked surveillance footage allegedly showing Israeli soldiers sexually assaulting a Palestinian detainee. And so then with that, you actually have Smotrich calling for a criminal investigation, but it's a criminal investigation to locate the leakers of that video without condemning the abuse. And that, as he already supported members of his party who broke into 2 military facilities after military police detained some Israeli soldiers accused of being involved in sexual abuse. And then on top of all that, right, if we zoom out completely, all this is obviously going on, we're still waiting for Iran and Hezbollah's response to the killings of 2 of their leaders. With the latest there being that the leader of Hezbollah has restated its plans to retaliate, claiming that making Israel wait for its punishment is a method of psychological warfare. And this, as the IDF has reportedly said, that any attack that harms civilians would result in a disproportionate response. And this, as Iran has also kept up its rhetoric as well, with its acting foreign minister accusing Israel of wanting to expand tension, war, and conflict to other countries. And with that, saying Israel has made a strategic mistake that could cost them gravely. We've also learned that Hamas has named the guy who masterminded the October 7th attacks as its new leader, with unsurprisingly Israel saying they will pursue and eliminate him. But with all that said, for now, on all these different fronts, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens from here, and in the meantime, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts. But that, my friends, is where your Thursday evening, Friday morning dive into the news is gonna end. Thank you for being a part of yet another daily dive into the news. And don't worry, you will see my dumb face relatively soon. It's just, 72 hours. There's gonna be a Monday show, and what are the odds there's gonna be big news that happens during that time? Ooh, I'll see you then.
The man known to history as Ulysses S. Grant was born as Hiram Ulysses Grant on the 27th of April 1822 in Point Pleasant, a small rural community in the southwest of the relatively young state of Ohio. His father was Jesse Root Grant, a farmer, tanner, and leather merchant who hailed originally from Pennsylvania and who could trace his ancestry in America back to the first establishment of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630. Jesse had moved westwards along with so many Americans in the early 19th century in search of new opportunities as the United States expanded from the east coast of North America. Ulysses' mother was Hannah Grant, originally Hannah Simpson. Her ancestry lay amongst the Presbyterian Scots, who had moved from Scotland to Ulster in the north of Ireland during the 17th century, and then emigrated again in great numbers from Ireland to North America in the course of the 18th century. She had married Jesse Grant in 1821, and Ulysses was their first child. She was a deeply religious woman, and Ulysses is believed to have taken after his mother more than his father, although he might well have acquired his anti-slavery stance from Jesse, who was a proclaimed abolitionist, meaning that he wished for slavery to be brought to an end throughout the United States. Ulysses would grow up in a large household, as he had 5 siblings: Simpson, Clara, Orville, Jenny, and Mary. The family was well enough off that Ulysses was provided with a substantial education at numerous private schools. This included a stint at the Rankin Academy in 1838, This was run by John Rankin, a noted abolitionist and educator who was prominent in running the Underground Railroad at the time. This was a system of safe houses and transport networks which abolitionists in America used to help escape slaves in the southern states of America to flee from slavery. Grant was growing up at a time when the United States was expanding swiftly, having largely been confined to a series of states along the eastern seaboard of North America in the 18th century. American eyes were turning west from 1800 onwards, with expansion towards the Great Lakes in the north and westwards towards the Mississippi River and the border with Spain's colonial possessions in Texas, New Mexico, and California. Beyond this territorial expansion, the social fabric of the country was shifting dramatically. Under British rule, slavery had been practiced throughout the colonies, though it was engaged in to a much greater extent in the southern colonies of Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia, with their sprawling cotton and tobacco plantations. Change was on the way, though, as by 1800 a number of northern states, including New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, inspired by the abolitionist movement, had banned slavery. By the time of Grant's birth, others, such as New Jersey, had become free states, while the period of his youth and adolescence saw the states directly to the west, such as Illinois and Michigan, follow their more liberal neighbors to the east, but the southern states remained unswerving in their defense of the institution of slavery, and so the stage was already being set during Grant's youth for a titanic struggle between the northern and southern states. Ultimately, Ulysses would find himself foisted into the conflicts of American society in the mid-19th century, owing to a decision made by his father in 1839. At this time, when Ulysses was still just 17, his father requested an acquaintance to nominate his son to the United States Military Academy at West Point in the state of New York. Then, as now, the leading military academy in the United States. The application was successful, though, owing to an error in his registration, Hiram Ulysses Grant was recorded as Cadet Ulysses S. Grant on entry. This new name stuck. Grant was initially skeptical about life at West Point, but he eventually grew into it, acquiring a reputation while there for his equestrian skills. Though, more broadly, he was only an average pupil. When he graduated in June 1843, he did so ranked 21st of 39 cadets in his class. Having finished at West Point, he was quickly appointed to the 4th Infantry Division and sent to St. Louis in the state of Missouri as a brevet second lieutenant. Grant seems to have been relatively uncommitted to a military career at this point, and considered this a temporary posting, from which he might retire in a year or two. Yet it was a highly significant period in other ways. While at West Point, Grant had befriended Frederick Tracy Dent, a fellow cadet who was slightly older than Ulysses. Dent originally hailed from Whitehaven near St. Louis, and Grant became a regular visitor at the Dent household following his arrival in Missouri. He had soon struck up a relationship with Dent's sister, Julia, and in 1844 they were engaged. The union, though, would not be formalized into a marriage for another 4 years, as war on the southern border interrupted their plans in this regard. The war, which erupted in 1846, was the direct result of the contentious position of Texas between the United States and Mexico, traditionally part of Spain's colonial possessions in Central America. Texas had become part of Mexico when the country acquired independence from its mother country, Spain, in the early 1820s. However, Texas's position within the broader Mexican state was always contentious, and in 1836 it broke away into a new Republic of Texas. Thereafter, it gravitated towards the US, and when he was elected as president late in 1844, a major plank of James Polk's policy platform was expansion of the United States into Texas. This was duly accomplished in 1845 with the formal annexation of the Republic of Texas. However, Mexico was unwilling to accept this new dispensation. In particular, a boundary dispute arose over where the new border between the US and Mexico should lie. Polk's administration favoring the Rio Grande, and the Mexican government arguing that the frontier should be located along the more northerly Nueces River. These issues spilled over into war in 1846. Grant's role in the war was limited as a junior officer, but also formative in its own way, as he fought at the Battle of Palo Alto, the first major clash of the war, near Brownsville in Texas on the 8th of May 1846. It was also the first time Grant had seen active combat. He subsequently served as a regimental quartermaster further west, towards California, and then in Mexico itself in 1847. He earned a commendation for his role in the Battle of Molino del Rey, fought near Mexico City in September 1847. And so, while he did not have any major command during the US-Mexican War, it is increasingly viewed as an important period in his career as a military commander. It was between 1846 and 1848 that Grant gained his first experience of warfare, and it was to be the only war he fought in prior to the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861, and as such, it must be considered his most active training period for the later conflict. Ultimately, the US-Mexican War ended in a total US victory. Having secured the border regions in the opening months of the conflict, General Winfield Scott advanced into Mexico itself in the spring of 1847, eventually occupying Mexico City, a campaign which Grant was involved in. The resulting Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, agreed in February 1848, saw Mexico acknowledge US control over Texas, while the Rio Grande was established as the border between the two nations. Consequently, while the US did not take the opportunity provided by its complete military victory to acquire further land from Mexico, the peace essentially consolidated its position in Texas and established the modern border between the two countries. In the aftermath of the US-Mexican War, Grant returned to St. Louis and married Julia Dent.
What?
Was a close
Come
relation,
on!
though initially, it caused a rupture between Grant and his parents, who were
You guys suck. You
discontented
can't
with
kill
the
that one
Dents
guy.
being
Put
slave
180
owners,
into him, you
despite their
pussies.
family squabbling,
God
which
damn it.
continued
I
with
put
varying
180 into
degrees of
that guy
intensity
killing me
for
standing in
decades to
front of
come.
you.
There was little doubting
Oh my
Ulysses and
God.
Julia's affection for one another. She had a cast in her left eye and squinted as a result of it, a characteristic which years later, when Ulysses
your
became
life is
president,
wah, wah,
she
wah,
considered
wah.
having
Your life
surgery
is wah,
to
wah,
correct.
wah, wah.
He vetoed the idea, stating that he
Braggadocio
loved
piece of
her
shit.
just as she was. Evidently, it was Julia's liveliness and other character traits which made Ulysses devoted to her. Eventually, they would have 4 children, 3 boys,
We
Frederick,
had that till you
Ulysses
couldn't
Jr.,
couldn't
and
treat me
Jesse,
one.
and a girl
I put
named
180
Anna.
into
But
him. What's your
Ulysses and
fucking?
Julia's
What's your excuse? I put 180 into him long before you guys said. I don't know.
early family life was repeatedly interrupted by Grant's military postings. In the years following the US-Mexican War, he was moved around several times to different military commands in Detroit and New York State. But it was finally to California that he was dispatched in the early 1850s. Gold had been discovered out on the west coast, and as settlement increased there around the middle of the century, a heightened military presence was needed. Julia was heavily pregnant at the time, and Grant was forced to leave her in the east, while he headed west. The next few years were a bleak period. Grant was moved around repeatedly across California and the Oregon Territory in an effort to better support his young family back home. He entered into several business ventures on the side, each of which failed. Then he started drinking more heavily, the beginnings of a long acquaintance he would have with the bottle. And eventually it
With the
was
bottle.
repeated acts of drunkenness and the clashes these caused
Fucking
with his
virgin.
commanding officers, which
I love
led him
nerds
to
trying to
resign
talk about
from the military
alcohol.
on the
It's hilarious.
31st of September 1854.
Listen to yourself talk,
Thus,
read the room.
at 32 years of age, and with no idea of what he might do henceforth, Grant headed back east to St. Louis to be reunited with his wife and family. Life outside the military, though, did not bring any relief from his hardships, as back in St. Louis, things went from bad to worse. Having accepted the farm allotment from Julia's father, he nevertheless continued to struggle financially, in part owing to an economic recession in the US in 1857. A venture into real estate proved abortive, and in the late 1850s, Grant was reduced to selling firewood on a St. Louis Street corner to make some extra cash, and even pawned a gold watch, a prized possession at one point. Years later, F. Scott Fitzgerald would state that there are no second acts in American life. He should perhaps have considered the highly successful second act of Ulysses S. Grant before making this assertion. In the early 1860s, Grant's life was to take a striking turn, brought about almost entirely by the crisis which enveloped America in the aftermath of the election of Abraham Lincoln as the 16th President of the United States in the presidential election of November 1860. Tensions had been brewing for decades between the free states in the north of the United States and the slave-owning states of the South. Now in 1860, Lincoln, though willing to compromise with the slave-owning states, was built into a bogeyman by the southern states, one who would seek to end slavery altogether in America. As a result, upon his election, the state of South Carolina seceded from the Union in December 1860. It was soon joined by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas in that decision. And these 7 breakaway southern states formed themselves into a confederacy. Outright armed hostilities between the Northern Union and the Southern Confederacy commenced in April 1861, when Confederate forces attacked a Union-held garrison at Fort Sumter in South Carolina, following which several more southern states seceded and joined the Confederacy, the capital of which was eventually established at Richmond in Virginia. The American Civil War had begun. Upon the outbreak of hostilities in the spring of 1861, Grant rejoined the army after a near 7-year absence. In the initial stages of the conflict, he was involved in efforts to recruit and train forces in Missouri and Illinois, but it was not long before he had been given a command in southern Illinois, based on his previous military experience. He would spend the first year of the war operating in the border region between southern Illinois and Kentucky, and further south towards Tennessee, playing a delicate balancing act in areas where military heavy-handedness was frowned upon in the hopes that these communities straddling the north and the south could be won over to the Union cause. At the beginning of 1862, frustrated by his lack of major commands, Grant sought and received permission from General Henry Halleck to undertake an offensive campaign. Campaigning south with 25,000 men, he won one of the first major victories of the war for the Union when he besieged and captured Fort Donelson on the River Cumberland in Tennessee. About 15,000 Confederate troops in total were captured in the engagement. Moreover, Grant had proved his daring and activist approach. When the commander of Fort Donelson had inquired as to what terms of surrender might be offered, Grant had replied that the only terms he was prepared to offer were unconditional surrender, as he intended to move presently against the fort. As a result of his actions at Fort Donelson, Grant was now promoted to the rank of Major General. 2 months later, he was the Major Union Commander at the Battle of Shiloh in Tennessee on the 6th of April, 1862, where over 100,000 Union and Confederate troops fought. Grant was theoretically victorious and repelled the Confederate incursion into the region, but it was a Pyrrhic victory, which resulted in over 10,000 Union troops being either killed or wounded. Grant's reputation, which had soared following the seizure of Fort Donelson, was now damaged. This was probably not aided by reports of his drinking. While we can probably dismiss legendary tales about Grant keeping a barrel of whiskey outside his tent while on campaign during the Civil War, there seems to be much truth to allegations that he was a heavy binge drinker on occasion, although one who often abstained for considerable periods of time. The most likely scenario suggests that Grant was prone to bouts of heavy drinking, but rarely drank heavily when he knew some important task lay ahead of him. Despite these setbacks, before the end of 1862, Grant had convinced his superiors to allow him to proceed towards Mississippi, where he planned to seize Vicksburg, one of the Confederates' major strongholds on the Mississippi River. This he duly succeeded in accomplishing 6 months later, when it finally surrendered on the 4th of July, 1863. Grant's actions here were particularly notable, as the Vicksburg campaign ensured Union control of the Mississippi River, effectively cutting the Confederacy in two
What was
between
that?
those states further to the west and the core of the southern states to the east of the Mississippi. While Grant was making a major name for himself in Tennessee and Mississippi, the war was proceeding with mixed results for both sides. While 1861 had seen the outbreak of the war and the consolidation of the Confederacy, in 1862 it settled into a particularly intense campaign in the eastern states around Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, where the Union and Confederacy were in the peculiar position of having their respective capitals less than 100 miles away from each other. But it was in 1863 that the war really turned. It was this year that Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, making the abolition of slavery in the Confederate States a stated war goal for the Union. Henceforth, it was clear that victory for the Union in the war would mean an end to the institution of slavery throughout the United States. Having won a significant victory repelling the Union forces at Chancellorsville in Virginia, the leading Confederate general, Robert E. Lee, undertook a campaign into the north through Pennsylvania in the early summer of 1863. This culminated in the three-day-long Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania between the 1st and 3rd of July, the bloodiest engagement of the entire Civil War. Gettysburg saw Lee's Army of Northern Virginia heavily defeated, with nearly 25,000 of his 75,000-man army either killed or wounded. It was a turning point in the entire conflict, which combined with Grant's seizure of Vicksburg to the west a day later on the 4th of July, put the Union on the offensive. It has also gone down in history as much for Lincoln's address to mark the battle the following November, in which he spoke of the great Civil War being fought to ensure that freedom shall not perish from the earth. Meanwhile, in recognition of his prowess in the field and accomplishments in the seizure of Vicksburg and other strategic sites, Grant was appointed as Lieutenant General in March 1864 and placed in overall command of the Union Army. He was now in charge of the effort to finally defeat the Confederacy and bring the war to an end. Grant's strategy was relatively simple in 1864. He intended to use the Union's numerical superiority to essentially confine Robert E. Lee's forces, protecting Richmond within the state of Virginia, while several of his sub-commanders would conduct campaigns further to the south and southwest. For instance, seizing Georgia. This strategy was broadly successful elsewhere, although despite the tightening of the noose on Richmond, Grant failed to take the Confederate capital in 1864, even after a near 2-week-long bloody engagement at Cold Harbor some 10 miles from the city ended
They always
in a
talk about
stalemate.
Cold Harbor. It's always Cold
Grant's
Harbor.
forces now settled in June 1864 into what would become a 9-month siege of the town of Petersburg, not far from Richmond. As it wore on, though, the siege of Petersburg became symptomatic of the Confederate cause in general. The breakaway affiliation was now largely confined to isolated centers of control out further west in Alabama and Texas, and a strip of land running along the east coast around Virginia and parts of the Carolinas and Georgia. By the autumn of 1864, the city of Atlanta in Georgia had been captured, and the Union Army had advanced as far as the Atlantic coast in parts of the South. As the winter set in, Lee's troops in Virginia began to desert in large numbers, owing to starvation and the general hopelessness of the Confederate cause. And by the spring of 1865, Lee's position was hopeless. The American Civil War eventually came to an end on the 9th of April 1865. A week earlier, Lee had abandoned the line which he had been trying to hold around Petersburg. Richmond was now open to a Union advance. As a result, on the 9th of April, Lee agreed to meet with Grant in the courthouse in the village of Appomattox in Virginia to negotiate the surrender of the Confederacy. Here, the two generals reminisced about their experiences in the war with Mexico nearly 20 years earlier, before getting round to the business of ending the Civil War. Grant, for his part, was authorized to negotiate that there would be few
the white men will
reprisals
decide
of
how
any
it
kind
goes.
for those
The
who
white
laid
men
down
will
their
decide
weapons.
how it goes.
As a result, when word spread west to the Confederate forces in those states, the surrender was quickly agreed to, and the last
long as they're
fighting
white.
occurred in Texas at the end of May.
Well,
Yet the man who had been at the center of these events,
Well, surrender
would
if
never
they're
live
white.
to see the ultimate cessation of hostilities. On the 14th of April, just 5 days after Lee had surrendered to Grant at Appomattox, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a stage actor and Confederate sympathizer, in Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Grant himself had nearly been present with Lincoln, having turned down an offer to attend the performance with the president. Indeed, allegations flew in the days that followed that Grant was also a target of Booth and his co-conspirators. They were unsuccessful if he was. Grant lived, and Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's vice president, was sworn in as the great man's successor. The end of the war witnessed the inception of the policy of Reconstruction. On the surface, this was aimed primarily at bringing slavery to an end in the Confederate States and ending the remnants of secession in the South. But such was the manner in which slavery was ingrained into every aspect of the economy and society of the southern states that Reconstruction would also necessarily require a massive program of social and economic reform if the southern states were to evolve to become more like their more liberal Union neighbors to the north. Reconstruction would dominate U.S. politics during the immediate aftermath of the war, and primarily throughout Grant's presidency from 1869 to 1877. Even prior to his tenure in the White House, Grant was involved in Reconstruction politics. In the months after the conclusion of the Civil War, he was sent on a tour of the southern states at the behest of President Johnson. This was important for two reasons. Grant was received favorably during his travels throughout the former Confederate states, somewhat surprisingly given his position as the Union's foremost general. This indicated that he could be a unifying figure during the Reconstruction period. Secondly, Grant submitted a report to Johnson upon completion of his tour, in which he recommended a lenient approach towards the former Confederate states he had just visited, in order to help end the bitterness of the Civil War. His drift towards politics did not end there. In 1866, he was appointed a general of the Federal Army, now that the Union titles of recent years were dispensed with. And then, in 1867, when Johnson removed Edwin M. Stanton from his position as Secretary of War, Grant was offered the position. Grant accepted the office on an interim basis in August 1867. However, a constitutional problem now arose surrounding the Tenure of Office Act. This dictated that a sitting cabinet secretary could only be removed by the executive with the consent of the Senate. As such, Johnson needed Stanton's removal to be sanctioned by the upper house of Congress. When the Senate refused to approve Stanton's dismissal in December 1867, Grant resigned in January, provoking a split with Johnson in the process, who had believed that Grant would refuse to relinquish his position as Secretary of War. This resulted in the decision over Stanton being sent to the courts for adjudication, Johnson's desired outcome. But the major outcome of the split from Johnson and Grant's brief flirtation with the office of Secretary of War was that he was now viewed as a potential presidential candidate within the Republican Party. At the Republican National Convention in Chicago in mid-May 1868, Grant won the party's support. He would run against the Democrat Horatio Seymour, a former governor of the state of New York. The Civil War hero ran in the months that followed on a campaign slogan of "Let us have peace." Ultimately, the election race was much closer than many observers had expected. Overall, Grant won by just 300,000 votes in the popular vote, although the Electoral College result was much more comprehensive, Grant securing 214 votes compared to just 80 for Seymour. As a result, on the 4th of March 1869, Ulysses S. Grant was sworn into office as the 18th President of the United States. He would serve for 8 years, winning a second term in 1872, with a much more comprehensive victory over a divided opposition. During the 8 years in which he served as President of the United States, Grant would have to grapple with a large number of very grave challenges. None was more pressing than the issue of Reconstruction, and the reunifying of the country after the trauma of a 4-year civil war. 2 weeks after entering office, he signed laws guaranteeing African Americans equal rights. Then, in the months that followed, his administration pressured those former Confederate states which had not ratified the 15th Amendment into doing so. This would guarantee Black Americans the right to vote in elections. The trade-off for the southern states in accepting this would be readmittance to the Union once it had been ratified by each state legislature. As a result of this carrot-and-stick approach, by 1871, the recalcitrant states, including Georgia, Virginia, Mississippi, and Texas, had complied and were readmitted to the Union. But in other respects, Reconstruction under Grant proved more difficult. Armed bands of traditional Southern conservatives sprung up across the former Confederate states in the late 1860s and early 1870s. The Ku Klux Klan was just the most prominent of these, and others, such as the Red Shirts and White League, collectively termed Redeemers, strove to use violence and intimidation to reclaim control of the southern states of the Democratic Party and force through a white supremacist agenda. In response, Grant's administration created the U.S. Justice Department and charged it with cracking down on white Redeemer movements in the South. In tandem, the Federal Army was dispatched to key sites in order to maintain law and order and defend Reconstruction. The result, it is generally acknowledged, is that Grant's administration crushed the power of the Ku Klux Klan for a generation in the South by arresting hundreds of senior members and prosecuting many of its most powerful benefactors who financed the Klan. Nevertheless, despite these efforts, it was clear by the mid-1870s that Reconstruction was largely failing, and Redeemer Democrats were seeking to create a society in the South, which, in the absence of slavery, would still disenfranchise and savagely oppress the large African American population across the former Confederate states. Reconstruction was intimately tied to the finances of the country. During the war, the Union government had resorted to issuing banknotes that were not backed up by the gold or silver standard. In the 19th century, all Western governments only issued money that was backed by a certain amount of gold and silver bullion reserves. The emergency caused by the Civil War had seen Lincoln's administration resorting to simply printing banknotes, resulting in considerable inflation. To correct the situation, Grant passed the Public Credit Act within 3 weeks of entering office. This essentially promised those who held banknotes issued during the Civil War that they would be repaid in coin backed by the gold and silver standard. The idea here was to curb inflation and also introduce much greater confidence into the financial system that the Civil War banknotes, termed greenback notes, were as good as real money and would not become worthless now that the war was receding in the collective memory. The overall effect of this was a continuation of the economic recovery, which had already started under Johnson's administration between 1865 and 1869. Yet it was not all smooth sailing on the financial front across the 8 years of Grant's administration. In 1873, an economic crisis developed following the collapse of the New York brokerage firm J. Cook and Company, which was heavily involved in the railway building boom of the time. As the west and east coasts were connected via extensive train lines, this was compounded by frailties in the global economic system, with Germany having demonetized silver in the aftermath of the unification of the country in 1871, triggering a series of financial failures in European capitals such as Vienna. The resulting downturn led to an economic depression, which would linger for the remainder of Grant's second term, creating financial hardship for many American citizens. The economic crisis was known at the time as the Great Depression, but this term was abandoned 70 years later when a much deeper economic crisis led to the period after the Wall Street crash of 1929, becoming known as the Great Depression. Accordingly, the economic crash and depression of 1873 to 1877 is today termed the Panic of 1873. On the foreign stage, Grant's policies were calm and pacifist. Despite his military background, he was no warmonger and deliberately tried to avoid conflict. However, he was also thoroughly inexperienced as a diplomat and left his foreign policy largely in the hands of the Secretary of State, Hamilton Fish. A number of issues confronted the US in the late 1860s. Firstly, the matter of reparations, and an apology from the British government for its supplying of naval support to the Confederacy during the Civil War remained unresolved. Several years of negotiations eventually resulted in the Treaty of Washington in 1871, whereby Britain acknowledged its role in building ships for the Confederacy and agreed to pay over $15 million in reparations. Thereafter, US-British relations improved steadily, and the two countries have been allies ever since. Just as pressing was the US's policy in the Caribbean, where a war, the 10 Years' War, had broken out between Cuban rebels and Spain in 1868. Despite occurring on its front door, the US maintained a policy of fairly strict neutrality in this, the first of 3 independence wars waged on the island of Cuba in the second half of the 19th century. More interventionist was the approach of the Grant administration to the island of Hispaniola. Then, as now, this was divided into 2 countries, Haiti and the Dominican Republic, or Santo Domingo. Grant was of the view that by acquiring control over Santo Domingo, the US could gain a strategic interest in the Caribbean and also in the lucrative sugar trade of the region. In 1869, negotiations were opened with the government there to purchase the country, with US business interests acting as intermediaries. But after 18 months of wrangling over this, the scheme came to nothing, largely owing to the opposition from within Congress. The affair tarnished Grant's reputation to some extent, and is an indication of the creeping imperialist aspirations of the US in advance of the most aggressive period of American empire in the 1890s. Grant's approach towards the Native American people was enlightened by 19th century standards. He was a relatively benign assimilationist, believing that the Native American people should be treated fairly and enjoined to embrace the benefits of a Western education, economy, culture, and government. This might seem like a heavy-handed form of cultural intolerance by today's standards, but for a country which counted several presidencies in the 1830s, 1840s, and 1850s, whose policies towards the Native American people had bordered on genocidal, Grant's approach was comparatively progressive. As a result, several peace treaties were negotiated with the Apache and Sioux ends of the Plains and Midwest during his first term in office, and conflict between the Native American people and the federal government was at an historic low. However, Grant's Native American policy could ultimately not escape the historical circumstances in which it was conceived. Try as he might to forge a new pathway, decades of conflict, oppression, and broken promises have created a thick animosity towards the US government amongst the Plains Indians. This was compounded in 1874 when gold was discovered in the Black Hills of Dakota Territory. As prospectors streamed into the region, the Sioux Indians there, led by Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, and Sitting Bull,
Get the
prepared
mobility
for
out of the
conflict.
game, you
The
guys
Great
suck.
Sioux War of 1876 and 1877 was a bitter end to Grant's presidency. Though famed for the victory, Sitting Bull's Lakota Sioux Indians won over General George A. Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn in late June 1876. The war ultimately ended in victory for the federal government. The administration of Rutherford B. Hayes, who had succeeded Grant by the time the war ended, imposed a harsh peace settlement whereby the lands of the Sioux were annexed and the Plains Indians of the region were forced into Indian reservations, a depressing end to Grant's enlightened Indian policy. In many other ways, Grant was ahead of his time. For instance, in 1875, he proposed a constitutional amendment to fundamentally weaken the ability of religious groups and churches to dominate the educational curriculum in a given state or region. Essentially,
This fucking
here he was
loser.
calling for greater
I was
separation
way over
of
in the
church
corner,
and
and
state
he chased
in a
me
manner
out of the
which
way
was
for
only
10
beginning
minutes
to be
because he's got a
countenanced
small
in the more
penis
liberal
and he
European
sucks
countries.
50 billion
Equally,
bags of
he
cocks.
was
You can
progressive
see him
in
suck
his
50
advocacy
billion
for
bags
America's
of cocks
Jews,
live in a real
appointing
time.
dozens of
Fucking
Jewish Americans
loser.
to federal office, perhaps most unusual,
Fuck off,
was his
loser.
appointment of Eli S. Parker
You went 10
as
minutes out
Senator
of your
Indian
way, piece
as his
of
commissioner
shit.
for
Piece
Indian
of worthless
affairs.
shit.
Yet Grant's
Abandon
presidency
your
was not
team,
without
come
scandal
chase the only
either.
surviving
During
member.
the
You're a
1872
piece of
election
shit.
campaign, the
You're
press
why
revealed
nobody
that a
wants to
number
play
of prominent
shooters
members
anymore.
of the
You're why
Republican
the
Party
genre's in
had been
decline.
involved in siphoning profits from the Union Pacific Railroad Company through a shady corporate entity called
Fight somebody
Credit
forward,
Mobilier.
not somebody
Grant,
back, you
who
piece
it
of
must be
shit.
said
That's
was
like coming back and
scrupulously
sucking
honest
a
throughout
medic.
his military
You
and
suck
political
dick, you
career,
suck
was
dick at
not
this. You're
implicated
really
directly,
bad at what you
but the
do.
fallout, nevertheless, damaged the Republicans, and by implication, his presidency. Worse followed in 1875 with the so-called whiskey ring scandal. This had involved prominent federal officials and whiskey distillers defrauding the government out of tax revenues, facilitated by a widespread system of bribery. Again, Grant was not involved, but his private secretary, Orville E. Babcock, was, as was the Secretary of War, William Belknap. Resignations followed, but Grant again was damaged in the final 2 years of his presidency by the actions of others. The final act of Grant's presidency became one of the most controversial moments in the constitutional and electoral history of the United States, though Grant acquitted himself well throughout the course of it. With Grant having served 2 terms, the Republican Party had selected Rutherford B. Hayes to contest the 1876 presidential election against the Democratic candidate Samuel Tilden. The election was held on the 7th of November, 1876. The result, when it came, was highly contentious. In the mid-1870s, there were 369 electoral college votes. When the votes were counted, it was clear that Tilden had won 184 votes, one short of the 185 needed to be elected president. Hayes had certainly won 165 votes, but 20 votes were the subject of considerable dispute. These were the electoral college votes for the states of Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oregon. In the case of Oregon, the vote was contested as one of the electors for the state was found to be illegitimate, as he was an appointed official there, while in the other 3 states, the vote was close enough that both parties claimed victory. The dispute dragged on into 1877. As it did, Grant, as the sitting president, came center stage. He instructed Congress to resolve the matter through legislative action and according to the electoral rules. He also refrained from mobilizing the army in the event of continuing disagreement, and on the 29th of January 1877, he formed an electoral commission to decide on the matter. This eventually resulted in what was to become known as the Compromise of 1877. Under its terms, Rutherford B. Hayes was elected as the 19th President of the United States, a decision which was certainly fair, as the surviving evidence indicates that Hayes had actually won the 4 states in contention, though by less than 1,000 votes in the cases of both Florida and South Carolina. As such, Hayes would enter the White House with the smallest winning margin in the U.S. electoral history, winning the Electoral College vote by 185 votes to Tilden's 184 votes. But his victory came at a cost. In return for their acceptance of the result, the Democrats demanded that federal troops, which had been stationed across the former Confederacy states in the South since the end of the Civil War, should be removed from states such as Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. In the aftermath of their departure, the Democrats tightened their grip on the southern states, essentially rejecting Reconstruction and opting for a harsh imposition of Jim Crow laws, which disenfranchised the free African American community in the South of the United States. Part of Grant's legacy has been tied up in his role in the Compromise of 1877, and the manner in which it allowed for the oppression of the African American communities of the southern states for decades to come. Yet Grant can hardly be held accountable for this. The southern states always seemed likely to set out on the path which they did in 1877, and Grant can hardly have prevented this in his final days in office. Conversely, at the time, he was widely praised for the manner in which he averted a constitutional crisis and renewed violence across the United States through his handling of the election crisis. Once the compromise was reached, and Hayes eventually took up office in early March 1877, Grant was once again a private citizen. He was still just 54 years of age, a markedly young age for a man who had served an 8-year term and who had already lived such an eventful life up to that point. Given this, his later years might seem like something of an anticlimax, but they were not without their own considerable points of interest. First up was a world tour which he and Julia undertook over a 2.5-year period between the early summer of 1877 and the autumn of 1879. Europe was first on the itinerary, with the Grants travelling to England to meet with Queen Victoria before a long sojourn through continental Europe, in which audiences were had with Pope Leo XIII and the Chancellor of the newly established German Empire, Otto von Bismarck. Others whom they met with included Napoleon III of France and the celebrated German composer Richard Wagner. Further travel was then undertaken to the Holy Land and Egypt, before returning to Europe and then heading onwards to Asia in 1879. The last leg of the world tour was the most interesting in many respects. While visiting Meiji, Japan, Grant became involved in efforts to establish a lasting peace between Japan and Qing China, during the course of which he got caught up in a conspiracy which aimed to assassinate both the Emperor Meiji and Grant himself. The Grants finally returned to the US, arriving in San Francisco in September 1879. During their long circumnavigation of the globe, Grant had received petitions from members of the Republican Party asking him to run again for the presidential office. In the 19th century, and for much of the 20th century, until the passage of the 22nd Amendment to the US Constitution by Congress in 1947, there was no legal barrier to serving more than 2 terms in office. However, tradition dictated that no one typically should serve more than 2 terms, in line with a precedent which George Washington had established. Now, however, many believed that tradition should be ignored to bring Grant back for a 3rd term. Grant was not indisposed to the scheme, and so encouraged his supporters to put forward his name at the Republican National Convention, which met at Chicago in early June 1880. What followed was a chaotic convention. 3 main candidates, Grant, James Blaine, and John Sherman, were the candidates. Grant secured the most votes in the initial voting, but not enough to reach the 370 votes required for any candidate to be officially selected by the party. After dozens of subsequent votes, the impasse was finally broken when Blaine's supporters conceived of a scheme to nominate a compromise candidate.
Get him with all the other fucking cocksucker losers.
Like Grant,
put them all in the same league. Get him away from us.
In the Civil War. Realizing he was beaten, Grant eventually threw his backing behind Garfield. The Republicans finally had a candidate, one who won the subsequent presidential election. But he did not last long in office, as Garfield was assassinated in September 1881, just months after his inauguration, becoming the second of 4 US presidents to have been killed in office. His vice president, Chester A. Arthur, succeeded Garfield and served until 1885.
In
the aftermath of his world tour and his failed presidential bid, Grant returned to the world of business. This was a time when US presidents did not receive a pension after leaving office, and Grant had never been an affluent man, nor had he ever been an astute businessman, and his post-presidential ventures proved no exception to this rule. Incredibly, the Grants had actually lost money on their world tour, where Grant could have capitalized on his renown to profit from it, and a venture into the railway sector in the early 1880s also proved unfruitful. Then, in 1883, Grant became involved in a Wall Street business venture which his son Buck had undertaken with Ferdinand Ward, a financier and a conman. In New York City, Ward was soon engaging in highly fraudulent activity involving hundreds of thousands of dollars in what was effectively a pyramid scheme. As a silent partner, Grant was almost certainly oblivious to what was happening, but Buck Grant was quite possibly privy to Ward's actions. In any event, Grant himself testified against Ward in court in 1885, shortly before his own death. And when the full details emerged, it actually elicited public sympathy for Grant, who had been swindled considerably by Ward. While all of this was unfolding in New York, the former president was working away at what became the only truly profitable business venture of his entire life. A renowned storyteller, Grant decided in the early 1880s to write his memoirs. His financial situation was inestimably aided by an offer by Mark Twain to publish the memoirs and guarantee Grant 70% of the royalties, an enormous percentage which was a clear act of charity on Twain's part. Eventually finished in the early summer of 1885, the memoirs have been well regarded ever since, with Grant depicting himself fairly and accurately by most standards. They became a bestseller, and Julia Grant was able to live a comfortable later life from the proceeds of royalties, which nearly reached $500,000 in sales, a huge sum for the late 19th century. Yet Grant would never live to see his memoirs published. In the summer of 1884, he had developed a throat problem, which was subsequently diagnosed in October as throat cancer. It advanced rapidly, and Grant would ultimately die from it on the 23rd of July, 1885, just days after finishing his memoirs, and at the relatively young age of 63. Over 1.5 million people attended Grant's funeral in a long 11-kilometer procession through New York City on the 8th of August 1885. In sharp contrast to later impressions of his presidency, Grant was eulogized
Come on,
at
you
the
fucking
time as
cocksucker,
being
leave me
comparable
alone!
to George Washington.
I need a
who was
moment to
buried
actually
in
do
Riverside
something.
Park.
Instead, I
His
got
body
thirsty
was later
cocksuckers
reentombed
up my
at the
fucking ass all
purpose-built
day.
General Grant National
Fucking
Memorial
thirsty
in the Morningside
cocksucker,
Heights
leave me
neighborhood of
alone.
Upper
Go
Manhattan,
play with the
where
other
it
thirsty
remains the
cocksuckers.
largest burial
Fucking piece
tomb
of shit,
dedicated
thirsty
to an individual
cocksucker.
in the
Fucking your
entirety
play
of
style
North
sucks
America.
dick, thirsty cocksucker.
During the 20th century, Ulysses S. Grant suffered from a poor reputation as one of the worst presidents of the United States. A belief repeatedly
Run some more, run
reaffirmed
some
in
more, run some
polls
more, run
and
some more.
surveys,
Crack, 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 crack,
using
crack.
him
Run
had
some more, run
changed
some
to
more.
extent
Land on
in
you,
the
land
last
on you.
20 years.
Crack, 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 crack,
But
crack,
even
crack,
so,
crack.
this slightly more positive view
Piece
of the
shit,
18th
fucking play
president
style. It'll
has
be
only
dead in
seen
2
him
years,
jump
you
up the
pieces of
rankings
shit.
to be
They're gonna
considered
edit you
about
out of
the
the goddamn
25th
play
best
style.
or so of the 46 US presidents. Yet what the foregoing has sought to highlight is that this historical impression is largely unfair. To be sure, Grant had his flaws, but both as a military commander and as US president after the American Civil War, he accomplished much during a very tumultuous and difficult period in the history of the United States. Grant's military record speaks for itself to a large extent. Early on, he gained some attention for his service during the US-Mexican War, but thereafter, owing to a number of personal motives, he drifted away from military service. The outbreak of the American Civil War, though, in 1861, brought him back into the field. In the early years of that conflict, he distinguished himself well enough to become one of the Union's senior commanders, and no one was as prominent as him in the final reduction of the Confederacy in 1864 and 1865. Many scholars have pointed to the overwhelmingly superior resources which Grant had at his disposal against Robert E. Lee in these closing stages of the war, and suggest that he could not really lose given these advantages. But several other Union generals had previously been given the same resources as Grant had in the last year or so of the war, and yet they had failed to defeat the Confederates. Conversely, Grant did,
Pay
and
attention
there is
to your
no
own shit.
doubting
I'm
his
sick. Yup,
significance
she
to
should
the
taunt you.
annals of the American Civil War.
her shit's appropriate. We
His
taunt you because you
post-war
suck
record
dick.
as president
Dude, you
is
suck
less
dick.
well
You
regarded
push too
than
hard.
it might be.
You don't know how
As
to
the
play. You
18th
think you're
president
ninja. You're
of the
not.
United
You
States,
got a small
he guided
penis.
the country
You're not
through
tough.
the
You're
arduous
rough.
early
You're
period
rough.
of Reconstruction and economic stabilization in the aftermath of the war. He was successful enough that he was easily re-elected for a second term in the election of 1872. Moreover, Grant succeeded in reducing the power of groups, such as the Ku Klux Klan, in the aftermath of the war, to a significant degree. Certainly, the Klan rose to become a very troubling aspect of American life again in future decades. But this was not Grant's fault. Furthermore, while his policies towards the Native Americans of the plains ultimately ended in war in the mid-1870s, Grant's approach towards the Indians was relatively progressive for its time, and the
Which is
Sioux
don't
War
kill them on
was
sight.
as much the
They call it
product of
progressive,
decades
but
of
it's the white
Western
man saying,
expansionism
hey, we
as
didn't
it
kill
was
them on sight,
anything
okay?
Grant
We're
did
somehow
during his
decent in
term
our own
office.
eyes.
Finally,
No,
his
they
role
just
in
didn't kill
resolving
them
the
on sight.
crisis which
I'll tell you
ensued
the
from the
truth.
presidential election of
Progressive to them
1876
is not
needs
killing
to be
other
considered
people of color
and
on sight.
appreciated. Thus, we are left with a man who has been largely unfairly denigrated by subsequent generations. Grant was something of a contrarian, and certainly a heavy drinker throughout his life, but ultimately he navigated many of the difficulties and challenges he encountered as well as he could. There are a great many of America's presidents who are generally more favorably regarded than Grant, who, if they had been placed in his shoes between 1869 and 1877, might not have kept the ship of state on such an even keel in the aftermath of the only civil war the country has ever experienced. That is to his credit. What do you think of Ulysses S. Grant? Should he be primarily remembered for his role as a general in the American Civil War? Or is his legacy as President of the United States one which has been unfairly dismissed and forgotten? Please let us know in the comment section. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. The man known to history as the Supreme Allied Commander, the hero of D-Day, and the 34th President of the United States, Dwight David Eisenhower, was born on the 14th of October 1890 in Denison, Texas. The third of 7 boys, Dwight acquired his more well-known nickname of Ike from his parents, who meant it to be a diminutive of their last name. Interestingly, all of the Eisenhower boys were called some variation of Ike when they were children, but only Dwight retained the nickname into his adulthood. His modest working-class upbringing and early educational career gave little hint of the grand accomplishments he would achieve in the coming decades. Eisenhower was descended from German, English, and Scottish immigrants to North America. His paternal ancestors had been German Protestant farmers who had emigrated to Pennsylvania during the 1740s. A branch of this family moved to Kansas during the 19th century, and there, at Lane University, David Eisenhower met his future wife, Ida Stover. The two were married in the autumn of 1885 and settled in the town of Hope, Kansas. The Eisenhowers opened a general store in Hope, and Ida gave birth to their first son, Arthur, the following year. Unfortunately, the family business failed, not only because of the economic downturn in American farming communities, but also due to the dishonest behavior and dealings of David's business partners. Now facing much poorer circumstances, the family was forced to relocate to Texas. Using his college education as an engineer, David secured employment on the Missouri-Texas-Kansas Railroad for a monthly wage of $40. The family rented a small house in Denison and began a slow financial recovery. During their few years in Texas, 2 more Eisenhower sons were born, Edgar and Dwight. In 1892, the family returned to Kansas, settling in Abilene. That year, Ida gave birth to the family's 4th son, Roy, and David became a mechanic for the Bell Springs Creamery, typically working 12-hour shifts, 6 days per week, and now earning $50 per month. The Eisenhowers thereafter put their roots in Abilene, and Dwight always considered it his real hometown, despite having been born in Texas. David and Ida raised their 6 boisterous and competitive sons in a modest 800-square-foot house on the wrong side of the tracks in Abilene, but with enough land on their property to grow a few subsistence crops and keep a few animals. Combined with David's salary, the Eisenhower family were able to support themselves well enough. Dwight later reflected on his mostly happy childhood. "I never knew we were poor," he said. The values stressed at home were typical of the ethical culture of people of the American Plains regions. Responsibility, hard work, faith, humility, modesty, honesty, and sincerity. In addition to their regular chores, each of the boys was assigned a plot of the family's property to cultivate crops, and each boy was responsible for selling the crops he produced to help support the family. David responded to any and all misbehavior on the part of his sons with firm discipline. Ike, more than occasionally, found himself in trouble for his hot and quick temper, which often landed him in fights with other boys in and out of school. Religion played an important role in the Eisenhower's family life. David and Ida were members of the Mennonite sect, called the Brethren of Christ, also known as the River Brethren, for their practice of baptizing their followers in rivers. A religious shift took place in the Eisenhower house in the spring of 1895, when the whole family fell into deep mourning. The family's fifth son, Paul, died of diphtheria at only 10 months old. As often happens in response to tragedy, Ida's faith seems to have undergone an alteration following her son's death. Some months earlier, Ida had begun attending meetings of the International Bible Students Association, an organization that would later become known as the Jehovah's Witnesses. Following her son's death, Ida's association with this sect became more pronounced, and the Abilene chapter of this group began holding meetings regularly at the Eisenhower home. David and Ida encouraged their children in their religious education and observance, holding daily Bible study sessions as a family. Both David and Ida were pacifists, and Ida focused much attention on Dwight's religious development in an attempt to temper his fascination with the historical wars and struggles he so enjoyed reading about. By the time Dwight left home for college, he had read the entire Bible twice. Predictably, his command of scripture remained formidable throughout his life. Yet while religion figured centrally in his childhood, Ike never actually joined a church himself. He never seemed to favor any particular Christian denomination either, though he had connections to the Presbyterian Church through his wife, Mamie. He described himself as a deeply religious man, and his religious sensibilities largely remained a private matter for him. Some historians speculate that this reticence to speak about religion might have been connected to his mother's religious affiliation. Some speculate that the Eisenhower sons, particularly Dwight, might have wanted to keep public discussion of their mother's religious practices muted for public relations purposes. The Jehovah's Witnesses were considered to be a rather radical French sect of millenarianism for much of the 20th century, and it is possible that the Eisenhower siblings, who all achieved and enjoyed impressive careers in law, banking, academia, engineering, healthcare, and the military, were keen to protect their family's reputation. Even John F. Kennedy, Eisenhower's presidential successor, was considered a controversial candidate for political office because of his Catholicism. In fact, America's current president, Joe Biden, is only the second Catholic and also only the second non-Protestant to hold the office of President of the United States. Abilene was typical of small-town America, a small city surrounded by a vast rural expanse. The Eisenhower children were therefore exposed to both city and country modes of life, although the rural experience was undoubtedly more familiar to them. Young Dwight developed a keen interest in the outdoors, particularly in hunting and fishing. At this particular time and place in America, life was tough for non-professionals and the working class, but most people firmly believed that hard work and honest dealings could eventually produce success, no matter where one started. Moreover, it was easier to achieve a modestly genteel prosperity in a town like Abilene than in a major urban or commercial center. Perhaps this sense of possibility and opportunity was part of the key to Ike's later confidence and success. For most of his early education, Ike was a fairly average student. He enjoyed his spelling and arithmetic lessons and became a voracious reader early in life. His mother Ida, a former teacher, had a decent collection of history books, and once Ike began reading them, history quickly became one of his favorite subjects, particularly military history. He pored over the military exploits of his favorite historical generals, including Hannibal and, predictably, George Washington. As a highly active and athletic boy, however, Ike was far more interested in football than anything else in his early life.
Oh, come on! I couldn't even get an ability up before they sucked it. Come on, man, your sucked it power is better than my one ability. You suck dick faster than I fucking can use a single
Forced him to
ability.
risk his
You
life
suck
at the
dick.
age of 14. Ike had sustained
pieces
a
of
leg
shit have
injury,
ruined
which led to a
Fortnite.
serious infection, for which his
Watching
doctor
you play makes
recommended
me
a
sick.
leg amputation.
Fucking
Ike
sick.
implored his parents to respect his decision
Well,
to
I've still
forego
pulled
the amputation, even if the infection killed him. He preferred to take a chance that he might get better and return the use of his legs. This would not be the first time that luck was demonstrably with him, and Ike made a full recovery, going on to play football in high school and college. Throughout his educational career, he continued to demonstrate fairly average academic performance overall, but retained his interest in history and reading. Western novels were a particular favourite of Ike's. He also showed an aptitude and interest in the practical applications of maths and sciences, which is unsurprising for the son of a college-educated engineer, as well as a man whose admirers would come to consider as
Yeah,
a
you're a crap
strategic and
person.
organizational genius. Ike's strategic thinking also manifested itself in his skill at card playing, a pursuit he continued to enjoy and to get better at throughout his life, particularly poker and bridge. His high school contemporaries
Oh God, can't the
predicted that
Americans
Ike
go
would
to
enjoy
bed
a
so I can
successful
win?
career as an
Jesus
Ivy
Christ, you
League
guys
history
suck.
professor.
You suck
However,
so bad.
financial circumstances and personal inclinations guided Eisenhower in a vastly
I love
different
America,
direction.
but I don't love how you play.
Dwight and his older
You
brother
suck.
Edgar graduated
You're
from
selfish,
Abilene
you
High School
push too
together
hard.
in
You
1909.
get wasted all the
Both
fucking
wanted to
time
go
for
to
no
college,
reason.
but the family's income at the time was
You ruined
insufficient
the
to pay tuition
strategicness
for
of the
two
game.
sons at
Epic
once.
doesn't know what
Dwight
to do
and
with
Edgar
you.
therefore agreed
Fuck
that
that
Edgar
shit.
would attend college first, while Dwight went to work at the creamery where their father worked. In this way, Dwight would help finance his brother's education, with the understanding that after Edgar graduated, he would do the same
Big
for Dwight.
spot.
He spent more than a year working
guy
6
jumped.
days a week for a
Where's
wage
he
of
going?
$3 at the creamery. It was soon suggested to him that entering a military academy could secure him a tuition-free college education. Ike's long love affair with military history and his active, sometimes temperamental personality
Ike's
as a
long
young man
love affair
made him
with
an
the
ideal fit
military.
for such an institution. It would teach him structure, self-control, and the value of cooperation, all of which would be crucial to his later military and political roles. In 1911, with decent test scores and a recommendation from his congressman, Eisenhower was admitted to West Point Military Academy in New York. Eisenhower's college career was
West
formative, and the experience he had there taught him much about the value of organization and calm, competent leadership. He started out less interested in becoming a military career man than in simply obtaining a college education and getting to play football at the same time. During his freshman year, Eisenhower even got the chance to confront the legendary Native American football player and Olympic
Confront?
gold medalist Jim Thorpe
Confront
in the
Jim Thorpe.
1912 game between West Point and the Carlisle Institute, a Native American trade school, seeking the glory of victory over the team who boasted America's foremost athlete at the time. Ike and several of his teammates focused their offensive on Thorpe in particular, hoping to bolster their team's advantage by taking him out of the game. Thorpe persevered through the onslaught, however, and Carlisle won the game. But this historic match was to be Eisenhower's last. He badly injured his knee following the game, with resulting permanent damage. Being no longer able to play football was a significant loss for Ike, but by his second year at West Point, he was coaching the junior varsity team and continued in this role until graduation. It is likely that coaching helped to foster the general in him rather than the soldier, and brought out the calm, competent, supportive, strategic, and organized side of him rather than the brash, impulsive, and sometimes aggressive side. Beyond his admittedly fulfilling role as football coach, Ike continued to be a decent, though not an excellent student. He took mostly science and technology courses, graduating 61st in a class of 164 students. He finished 10th in his class, however, in English and history, and was much admired for his eloquent writing. He had made the best of a college career which had largely not included playing football, a reality which had embittered him for a time. Ike began to smoke heavily by his second year at West Point, and enjoyed as many poker games as he could, both prohibited activities at the academy. While his academic record was merely average, his discipline record was even less impressive, and he ranked 125th in discipline in a class of 164 students.
125th,
Still,
you white people
Eisenhower
measure
made
stuff
lifelong
so
friends
carefully.
in college and formed relationships that would one day figure in international importance. Many of the young men with whom he attended college would be tapped for high military command by the beginning of World War II. Popularly dubbed the class the stars fell on, no less than 59 graduates, roughly a third of West Point's class of 1915, went on to become generals, including 2 5-star generals, Eisenhower himself and Omar Bradley. Ike's life shifted significantly after graduation, and within a year, his future military career had begun to take shape just as he met and fell in love with his future wife. Ike opted for the infantry after graduating from West Point and was posted to Fort Sam Houston near San Antonio, Texas. He was introduced to Mary Dowd, known as Mamie, soon after his arrival on the base. Mamie was the pretty, charming and vivacious daughter of a wealthy family from Denver, Colorado. The Dowds owned a lucrative meatpacking company and spent the winters in Texas. He was just about the handsomest man I'd ever seen, Mamie later wrote about the fair-haired, blue-eyed man who would become her husband. Ike proposed to Mamie on Valentine's Day in 1916, and the two were married that July. Their first son, who they named Dowd, adorably nicknamed Ikey, was born the following year. Despite attempts to be posted overseas in a more active role, Eisenhower spent most of the next few years in junior officer training, coaching football for Peacock Military Academy and St. Louis College, training units and regiments, or serving in supply and logistics roles. His emerging organizational, administrative, and leadership qualities served him well through the First World War years, although he was repeatedly denied the opportunity to see any real military action. Eisenhower learned a great deal during this period, however, forming opinions about how the military of the future should be developed, both strategically and technologically. Like many other career military men of his day, Eisenhower saw the value of developing tanks and firepower rather than infantry offensives. He trained tank regiments in Georgia in 1917 and in Pennsylvania in 1918. In 1919, after being posted to Camp Meade, he helped orchestrate a transcontinental vehicle convoy from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, which taught him a great deal about tank and truck capabilities, depending on terrain. This massive effort, involving hundreds of men and over 80 vehicles, was carried out with very little paved road to smooth the convoy's way, and there were literally dozens of breakdown events during the 3,200-mile, 62-day journey. The experience convinced him of the efficiency, productivity, and logistical benefits to be gleaned from the creation of a national highway system, which would later be a staple infrastructure program of his presidency. It wounded Ike's pride deeply that he had not been able to serve in a combat role in the war. He had finally received orders to depart for Europe with the unit he had finished training on the 18th of November 1918. However, exactly 1 week prior to the date of his departure, the armistice was announced. Ike was deeply disappointed. Conventionally, the way to establish a reputation and earn promotion in the military was through distinguished combat service, and Ike worried that his career might stagnate as a result of his never having served overseas. Yet it may have been a blessing in disguise, as few soldiers were prepared for the brutal savagery of the new, more technologically advanced warfare. The casualties were staggering, and the impact on the average soldier's mental health often debilitating. Instead, Eisenhower was lucky enough to spend the First World War years safely and contentedly with his young family and the friends he had made in the service. In 1920, Mamie and Ikey, who had been staying with her parents off and on during the previous year, rejoined Ike at Camp Meade, Pennsylvania, where they settled into their new house on the base, right next door to Georgia, with whom Ike had quickly become friends. The two shared an enthusiasm for experimentation with military strategy and equipment, forming a personal and professional relationship that would continue through 3 decades and a world war. Tragedy struck in January 1921, however, when the 3-year-old Ike died after contracting scarlet fever. The child had caught the disease from a maid Ike and Mamie had hired, who had begun work in the Eisenhower household before she had fully recovered from her illness. Devastated, Ike and Mamie blamed themselves, and the tragedy had a profound impact on their marriage. Both grieved deeply and privately. Ike rarely spoke about his son's death, later writing, "This was the greatest disappointment and disaster in my life, the one I have never been able to forget completely." A year after Ike's passing, their second and only son, John, was born, and a sense of joy, comfort and continuity began to return to the Eisenhower household once again. Every year, without fail, Ike sent Mamie flowers on the anniversary of Ike's death. Some of his biographers view Eisenhower's career during the interwar period as relatively stagnant, since he attained a rank no higher than lieutenant colonel prior to the beginning of World War II, when he was 51 years old. However, the 1920s and 1930s were, in fact, a highly productive learning period for Ike, when his more modern views on military development and his emerging promise as a leader, administrator, and strategist brought him to the attention of highly influential military men who mentored him and helped promote his career. Chief among them was General Fox Connor, whom Eisenhower met over dinner at George Patton's house at Camp Meade. Connor was impressed with Eisenhower, and having been appointed Army Chief of Staff by General Pershing, used his influence to have Ike appointed his executive officer in the Panama Canal Zone in 1922, where Connor commanded the 20th Infantry Brigade. Ike, Mamie, and baby John spent the next 2 years in Panama.
What?
The Canal Zone was
I
a
got
rather
killed
rural
before
and
the goddamn
underdeveloped
plunger
area,
connected.
not the most stimulating environment for a
What
new
was
mother
that?
or her
Don't
child.
land here, don't
Being
land here.
together was important for the Eisenhowers, however, and while it strained their marriage, Ike and Mamie coped as well as they could with
Nope.
family life and child rearing under the stress of constant relocation and new, sometimes uncomfortable environments, as many career military families do. Fortunately, his duties as a staff officer in Panama were relatively light, and General Connor encouraged Ike to use the extra time to read extensively on history and philosophy, particularly military history and strategy. Eisenhower learned a great deal from Connor while serving as his executive officer, and came to understand that Connor took such a personal interest in him because of the general's conviction that another world war was coming. When it did, Connor knew that the Allies would need the ablest and best prepared men available to step into high command. Accordingly, as part of his tutelage, Connor shared his First World War experiences with Eisenhower, the tactics of battle, the successes and failures, the heavy decision-making involved in maintaining alliances and mobilizing men and resources. He expressed his grave concerns about the questionable soundness and potentially problematic nature of the Versailles Treaty as well. Eisenhower emerged from Connor's mentorship more confident in his perspectives and abilities, and prepared to excel more than ever before. After returning to Camp Meade in 1924, Eisenhower, thanks partly to General Connor's influence, was admitted to the Command and General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where he studied Army tactics and operations and the problem-solving involved in managing them. Completion of General Staff School was necessary to rise in the Army ranks, and the curriculum was notoriously grueling. No longer simply an average student, in 1926, Ike graduated first in a class of 275. Connor intervened once again in 1927 to have Eisenhower assigned to the American Battle Monuments Commission in Washington, D.C., where he was tasked by General Pershing with writing a narrative history of the American Expeditionary Forces service in Belgium and France during World War I. Later that year, he was admitted to the Army War College in D.C., where he once again graduated first in his class in 1928. Ike and Mamie spent the next year in France, where Eisenhower was commissioned to tour and produce a guide of the First World War battle sites in France. He was then assigned to the War Department in D.C. and tasked with developing plans and strategies for industrial mobilization should another major war break out. In 1930, he met the newly appointed Army Chief of Staff, Douglas MacArthur, whom he quickly impressed with his intelligence and competence. "This is the best damn officer in the army," MacArthur once remarked about Eisenhower, and resolved, like General Connor before him, to promote Eisenhower's career. Like Connor, MacArthur believed another war would be on the horizon, and in terms of potential military leaders, Eisenhower was one of the most promising. Ike spent the 1930s working closely with MacArthur. As his assistant in Washington, Eisenhower helped to formulate policy and mobilization strategy for a potential upcoming war, according to MacArthur's vision. And in 1935, he accompanied the general to the Philippines, where MacArthur had been assigned to serve as military advisor to President Manuel Quezon. The Philippines were in a transitional period towards independence, and US authorities were anxious that the region be defended from a potential invasion, which they worried might be launched by the Japanese. Eisenhower spent the next 4 years attempting to operationalize and implement MacArthur's plan for the Philippines' defense, one which required key regions to be reinforced using a citizen army, properly trained to fight, and which could be carried out with limited support and resources from the United States. The task was daunting, and the odds of success seemed bleak, but Eisenhower dutifully pursued his assigned goals and did the best he could under the circumstances. Unfortunately, the Philippines would fall to the Japanese by 1942 anyway. What made Ike's experience in MacArthur's service much more difficult was the political infighting among the Americans stationed there, and the personality clashes with MacArthur. But Ike had come a long way from being the hot-tempered young man spoiling for a fight. He had learned instead to compromise, conciliate, and negotiate. He was also noted for maintaining cordial relations with people he disagreed with, a skill he undoubtedly perfected in MacArthur's service. MacArthur was notorious for his irascible personality, and nearly a decade working with him effectively ruined all but the most professional part of the relationship between the two men. Eisenhower, however, proved to have truly mastered himself by having served so well under MacArthur. Ike's strong suit, going forward, would be his remarkable ability to deal diplomatically, patiently, and effectively with the many high-ranking Allied leaders and commanders, all of whom had to collaborate if they were to secure victory. And many of the Allied leaders and generals of the Second World War were famously difficult, even intolerable personalities. Churchill, de Gaulle, Stalin, Montgomery, and Patton, to name just a few, were all more than challenging to work with. And while they rarely expressed any unreserved approval of their international compatriots, virtually all had good things to say about Eisenhower, seeing him as infinitely competent, fair-minded, genuine, and trustworthy. By 1939, Ike was more than ready for a change, and he discreetly wrote to friends in Washington to help him find a new posting. He returned to Washington shortly after war was declared between Britain and Germany in September. He spent the next 2 years in multiple postings, both as a staff officer and in the field,